To you. At 8 on Cross Question, Paralympic legend Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, political strategist Joe Tanner, Labour MP Natalie Sleet and Conservative MP Neil Shastri-Hurst. It's International Holocaust Memorial Day today, and at 9 I'll be joined by Dov Foreman, who'll be taking your calls.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, it's 7 o'clock. The Chancellor has told LBC that the government wants to stand by pubs after announcing tax relief on new business rates. The Treasury says from April, pubs and music venues in England will cut bills by 15%. It's claimed that support will be worth around £1,600 on average next year. Rachel Reeves has told LBC they're announcing more support for the hospitality sector through this package.
Changes as well to licensing rules, including that during the Men's World Cup, pubs will be able to stay open later for home games in the later rounds of the tournament, which we're really excited about, and we're going to be consulting more widely on whether big occasions like Eurovision might see later licensing for pubs. We want to back our pubs. They are huge assets in our local communities, and this government wants to stand by them.
The Conservatives and landlords have warned it doesn't go far enough. Dozens of flood warnings are still in place, with travel disruption expected to last into tomorrow following Storm Chandra. It has brought heavy rain and strong winds to the UK. Hundreds of schools have been closed and people have had to be rescued from their cars in Devon and Somerset. The Chief Rabbi has told LBC that the Jewish community must preserve the memories of Holocaust survivors. Today marks 81 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. The King and Queen have held a reception at Buckingham Palace to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, and national landmarks will be lit up later. Rabbi Ephraim Mervis says recent events highlight the importance of learning the lessons of history.
Today highlights the very fact that unfortunately, with the end of the Holocaust, hatred didn't end. We are exceptionally concerned about a significant increase of Jew hatred right around the world, and there is a desperate need for education, for reminders, and for teaching people of the dangers of hatred.
The acting Chief Constable of West Midlands Police has apologised to the Jewish community after Israeli fans were banned from a football match. His predecessor retired with immediate effect after an independent review criticised the decision. It found that the force failed to engage with the local Jewish community after Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were told they couldn't attend a game at Aston Villa. The chief federal judge in Minnesota has ordered the head of the US ICE Department to appear before him on Friday. It follows the deaths of 2 people in Minneapolis at the hands of federal officers, the most recent being nurse Alex Pretty. Border Commander Gregory Bovino has been removed from his role in the city, and John Sandweg, a former acting director of ICE, told Tonight with Andrew Marr the job was completely different to what he was used to.
So you're down there at the border in the middle of the desert, dangerous area, dealing with drug cartels in the middle of the night. Suddenly you're up there in Minneapolis dealing with American citizens who are protesting this mass deportation. We've seen the videos, not just the shooting of Mr. Preddy, but just writ large, where these very aggressive responses dealing with the protesters, use of pepper sprays and quickly resorting to tear gas.
And one battle after another, and Sinners lead the nominations list at this year's BAFTA Film Awards with 14 and 13 respectively. Hamnet has broken the record for the most nominations for a female-directed film in BAFTA history with 11. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 58 points at 10,207. The pound buys $1.37 and €1.15. LBC weather, rain and strong winds for Scotland tonight, though it will become drier and calmer later. A few showers for southern and western areas. Clear elsewhere, lows of -3. Bright spells for much of Scotland tomorrow, but cloudy and wet in the northeast. Patchy cloud and sunshine elsewhere, a high of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. 5 minutes past 7 on LBC. Welcome to the show. It's Iain Dale here with you until 10. Don't forget you can watch the whole show on Global Player, the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel, not just Cross Question, the whole show. Now, I want to spend this hour talking about the vexed question of where we should house asylum seekers, because it's all very well people say, well, we shouldn't be housing them at all, and they should be deported back to the country that they came from or deported back to France. Well, we all know that it's not as simple as that. So let's not come up with that as a suggestion, shall we? I agree with anybody who says that people who are in this country illegally have to be deported. There shouldn't be any question of that happening, but there are hoops to go through before that can happen. So in the meantime, where should they be deported? Now, the previous government and this government have tried all sorts of different things. Remember that barge that was hired from, I think, the Netherlands that was in Portland Harbour? Well, that didn't work out very well, did it? Secondly, the last government commissioned about 400 hotels at a cost of £9 million a day to house asylum seekers. This government said that they wanted to change that, and they say that they've halved the number of hotels being used, and they're now commissioning army barracks, some of them disused, to house them in. But of course, local communities are up in arms. Now, I live in Tunbridge Wells, which is about 10 miles from Crowborough, which is where a barracks has been recommissioned to house, well, they say up to 500 asylum seekers. At the moment, there are only 27 there. They were smuggled in a bus at 3 a.m. in the morning. And local people are very, very angry. There have been regular protest marches. And Shabana Mahmood, she was talking to Nick Ferrari this morning, and she explained that she understands the concerns of local residents.
I have made sure that we are very alive as the Home Office, and also working with local partners about all of the potential ramifications for people, and that those measures are in place. So what I can reassure you is that we are working closely with everybody in the local area to make sure that those concerns are dealt with.
Now, the former Immigration Minister Kevin Foster, he was Immigration Minister under the Tories, he explained to my colleague Rachel Johnson why he deemed Crowborough unsuitable for asylum seekers when he was in government.
Crowborough is a site that I rejected to be part of our programme of larger scale accommodation centres based on the model that Greece has. If people visit it, it's fairly spread out brick buildings. There was a big cadet unit presence on that as well, which we didn't think was appropriate to mix with housing large numbers of single male adults, which I think most people can work out why that would be the case. Whilst the government is right to U-turn on the cancellation of having large-scale accommodation centres, this site isn't one that we saw as suitable or appropriate.
So if you live in Crowborough, I'd love to hear from you, because there is, I won't say a split opinion, because I think there is an overwhelming majority of people who do not want this site to go ahead. It's a bit late for that now, but seeing as there are 27 people already there. But I think the question that we all have to answer is this. If we don't house them on barges, if we don't house them in hotels, if we don't house them in army barracks, well, what is the alternative? Because it's all very well everyone going on protests in Crowborough saying we don't want them here. Well, that could be replicated up and down the country, because I can't imagine there being any community that says that there's a majority of people saying, yes, we'd love to have them in our community. Now, there are people in Crowborough who are saying that they should be welcomed and shown British hospitality. And look, I think that we should be treating everybody with respect until they show us why we shouldn't. And the trouble is that there have been too many incidents now where there have been serious crimes committed by people in these hotels, or dare I say it, in other forms of accommodation. So it's no good saying, well, something must be done, jerking our knees and saying, well, they just should be sent back and have done with it, ignore the laws and all the rest of it. That is not going to happen. So what is the alternative to these army barracks? 0345 6060 973. Well, Mims Davies is Shadow Secretary of State for Wales and Shadow Minister for Women and Conservative MP for East Grinstead and Uckfield, which is not the constituency where the Crowborough barracks are, but it's next door. And I think there are sites, Mims, in your constituency that are housing asylum seekers.
Yeah, evening, Ian. And yes, my constituency in Copthorne has been doing its bit, so the other flank. And you're right, Sussex Weald is the actual constituency that the Crowborough camp is in. But my constituency backs straight onto it. In fact, some of my constituents have lost house sales as a result. I want to thank my constituents in Copthorne who've been supporting the Afghan families who originally came to that hotel 5 years ago. But like many, it's now predominantly a single adult male facility. And my understanding is some of those people may be moving to Crowborough as well. So certainly my community and Sussex has been doing its bit. And I think the barge you mean is the Bibby Stockholm.
That's the one, yeah.
That's what it was called.
I think we have to understand local communities' fears over these facilities, but if we're not willing to spend the £9 million a day housing them in hotels, if we're not willing to put them in army barracks, which we all think is sort of secure, but the one in Crowborough actually is not. If we're not going to do that, what is the alternative?
Yeah, so they're not tagged and they're not detained. So if you're in Copthorne, you have seen people wandering around the village. We have had illegal working, reports of shoplifting and people feeling unsafe. And that is the reality for many of those people in what is a big rural area. And I was interested this morning when hearing your colleague Nick Ferrari talking to the Home Secretary, where she talked about the engagement and how this was being done slowly, etc. But she hasn't spoken to our police and crime commissioner. She hasn't spoken to our chief constable, and her ministers have been directly working with Nuz, who is Nuz Ghani, who's the MP for Sussex Weald. But I'd certainly say as a neighbouring MP, where apparently some of the asylum seekers will be coming on day trips to East Grinstead and Uckfield, certainly the town clerk's not been directly contacted, the town mayor, and we've been left in the dark as a community. And if you want people to understand what's going on their doorstep and be reassured in the way that the Home Secretary was apparently trying to do on LBC today, if you haven't engaged and there is no answer currently on the £5.5 million this is going to cost taxpayers to Sussex Police, there has been no engagement on this, then I'm afraid then the concerns are not being properly dealt with. And I, alongside Nuz, will be rightly standing up for my constituents who feel that they're doing their bit, but they're not getting enough answers and they're worried about who's on their doorstep. They're undocumented males that we've had in Copthorne for some time, and now we're going to be seeing this in Crowborough. It's just near Winnie the Pooh land. It is very rural, and there is rumours, and these are not corroborated, but apparently there are several that have left already because it's about a week after people do not check in that they are followed up. And I think that is unacceptable. And that's what Katie Bourne, the Police and Crime Commissioner, has said as well.
Is there a danger here that fears are growing among the local community, which may be not justified, because we read in our newspapers sort of with a degree of regularity that an asylum seeker here, an asylum seeker there has committed a terrible offence, predominantly against women, it has to be said, that therefore people think, well, they're all like that. And is it not a danger to we're in danger of stigmatising the whole group of people for the actions of a very small number?
Forgive me if you can hear the bell going behind me, but you're absolutely right, which is why the communication could and should be better to the villages and towns in the area. And it is creating unrest and distrust. And if the government was so confident about this, why have they not been properly engaged? Why were the migrants brought in under the cover of darkness? Why hasn't there been proper engagement with those neighbouring towns and villages? And why haven't they listened to the experiences of those in Copthorne? So for me, the Home Secretary to come on a live programme this morning and, clearly say that she hadn't spoken to the Chief Constable in Sussex after numerous protests, both in Crowborough and across the summer in Copthorne, I feel is fundamentally irresponsible. If you're trying to allay fears and bring people on this journey, remember 66,000 people are now apparently crossed in small boats since Keir Starmer came to power with the smash bash the gangs motif. Unfortunately, that is not recognised in what communities are feeling. I don't think anybody wants to stoke up fear. They want answers. They need to be respected. And both neighbouring MPs and town councils and villages, I've got Nutley and other areas nearby, Maresfield, where people could be, wandering around. They want to know who's in their community. And if they're illegal and they shouldn't be here, that they're being processed properly. And just finally on the cadets point, Kevin Foster's been very helpful in this, former immigration minister. My cadets in Uckfield, London and South East, all across the area have been affected by this. Weekend evenings, training manoeuvres for multiple young people who are having to be dispersed and having their opportunities curtailed. People wanted this being re-provided, and that was the reason that it was apparently not safe, legal and appropriate. Those questions have not been answered by the time people have moved in. I feel this alongside Niz Ghani, who's been leading this with the Crowborough Shield and many people locally, to get those questions answered. If we want this to be calm and done rationally and people to be taken from these shores who shouldn't be here, then the communication needs to step up.
Just to finish off, to come back to the questions I asked initially, if they're not going to be in hotels or army barracks, what's the other alternative? Because I think any politician that criticises the government for what they're doing has surely got to come up with an alternative.
Well, we've been doing our bit in Copthorne, and had a hotel there for over 5 years. So my residents have done the right thing. The Bibby Stockholm you mentioned earlier was perfectly suitable for oil rig workers. I still don't understand why that wouldn't be suitable too. Look, we need to stem the flow coming across. I understand there needs to be a deterrent, and of course it needs to be suitable areas. But this is very, very rural, and they haven't provided the places for the for our cadets. I think they should have got this right, and they could have brought people on the journey. That's been the fundamental problem here.
But you seem to be saying that hotels are the answer.
So some of them are apparently moving from Copthorne into Crowborough. Look, there's no perfect place here. It's about stemming the tide, I agree, but there are areas that are doing their bit. And the number one thing the government needs to answer is about the funding, the 5.5 million affecting Sussex Police. If they want people on board and feeling that this is done right, they need to answer their questions on that funding as well.
OK, thank you very much. That's Mims Davies, the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales. She's MP for East Grinstead and Uckfield. So I'm not sure we had an answer there about what alternatives there are. Have you got any solutions? I mean, I'm particularly keen also to hear from people in the Crowborough area as to why you are so vehemently against this idea that your local barracks should be used. I think a lot of people believe that, well, it should be in a secure unit. If people are here illegally, they need to be detained securely rather than in a facility like Crowborough, which has a front gate, and that's about it. 18 minutes past 7.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
They have fatal incompetence.
Straight to the point.
What is the problem they've got over there?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
The country's going backwards. Growth down. Energy prices up.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC. on LBC.
7:20 on LBC. We're talking about where asylum seekers should be housed. Now, somebody is drawing attention to the fact that there is a difference between an asylum seeker and an illegal immigrant. Yes, I do understand that, but many of the people who come over on small boats, they are here illegally because it is illegal to cross shipping lanes in the way that they're doing it on these small boats. So let's leave that as a separate discussion. Let's agree that once they get here, it is incumbent on the British state, the British taxpayer, to provide some sort of accommodation for them. Now, the previous government, they under Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, let's remember, they were in the Home Office at the time, they concocted this scheme where we would be paying £9 million a day to house asylum seekers in hotel accommodation, 3 or 4 star hotels. Now, there was a lot of resentment about that, not least because of the cost to the taxpayer. And they were highly criticised by Labour politicians at the time for doing this. And the Labour politicians did not come up with any alternatives. They said it would be inhumane to house people in army barracks. And yet that's now exactly what they're planning to do, not just in Crowborough, but in several other places too. Now, I think that probably the barracks solution is going to be the one that the government adopt more widely. But the problem is that one army barracks is very different from another. And if local communities are worried about safety, and because there are all sorts of incidents, and we've seen them catalogued, these are not made up, they are incidents where asylum seekers have been found guilty in UK courts of some fairly serious crimes against women. Now, nobody wants to see that in the local community. So you've got to understand why some local communities, including in Crowborough, are protesting against this kind of decision. If it was secure accommodation, I think people might be reassured, but this one isn't secure accommodation. And I don't want to people to feel that they are imprisoned. But on the other hand, if they are genuine asylum seekers coming from war zones in areas where they might be tortured, I mean, who's going to object to a brief period of time, a month or a couple of months, in secure accommodation where you probably don't have the same freedom as everyone else does, but at least you're safe? Surely we need to think about that aspect of this too. Let's go to Bob in Brentford. Hello, Bob.
Hello there, Ian. Right, I'm so fed up listening to this. If somebody enters this country, asylum seeker, refugee, whatever he is, illegally, he commits a crime under the 1971 Immigration Act. The Act, the law of this land states you can go to prison for 5 years or be immediately deported to a safe country. It also takes into account people that throw away their papers. They will be returned to the port of embarkation. That's France. So what are we doing? I can drive down the road at 100 miles an hour, knock somebody over, go into court and say, well, the law don't apply to me because it doesn't apply to these people. You can't have one law for them and one law for us. And that's because the government's not enforcing the law. So we need to enforce the law, don't we?
You can't return people to countries that won't take them back.
Look, we have law that we have to abide by, don't we?
Of course.
We have an Immigration Act in 1971. Our government is choosing to ignore it. It is taking people who commit criminal offences and put them into accommodation and pay for it. No, I'm sorry, that's not what the law says. So you either have law or you don't. And I'm sorry, I would return them to France because that's what the law says.
Well, there is an agreement now with France, which is supposedly one in, one out. But the Home Secretary told Nick Ferrari this morning that under that scheme, we have returned 281 people. I mean, a massive 281 people. But we've taken in 350, which, I mean, I'm not very good at maths, but I think I can work out that isn't one in, one out.
But do you agree that we should enforce the law?
Well, of course, I agree that laws should be enforced, but you can't. If somebody comes here, whether they're coming from France or wherever, and they come from a war-torn country, and that war-torn country actually won't take them back anyway, you can't just dump them somewhere, can you?
Well, the Immigration Act says they will be returned to a safe country. We had Rwanda.
Well, yes,
but no.
Okay.
Labour said no.
You say a safe country. That's fine. But if that safe country won't take people back, if there is no reciprocal agreement, then you can't do it.
Rwanda is suing this country for £50 million for making the agreement. They agreed to be a safe country, didn't they? We have a government that is actively...
Well, with respect, Bob, this conversation is exactly what I said I didn't want to happen, because you're diverting me away from the subject which I asked you about to find where we should house people.
You, isn't it? If you don't want to hear the truth and you don't want to talk about the truth...
Well,
and the way
if I didn't want to hear what you said, I would have cut you off a long time ago. All I'm saying is... Bob... All I'm saying is that my initial question was, if we can't house them in hotels or barracks, where should we house them? Right. We can't just leave them on the streets.
Well, what about taking a redundant line and anchoring it mid-channel and taking their boats to that? Then they don't even land, do they? And then you can process them there.
Is that a serious suggestion?
What about one of the islands off Scotland?
One of the islands off Scotland?
Yeah, why not use one of them? There's military bases on there.
Are there?
Where? It's secure. Sorry?
Where?
Oh, I lived in Scotland. I couldn't tell you the name of the island. I could actually, I could. I believe if you go to, it's off Mull. There's an island out there. Okay, they did use it for military testing, but you could. I'm sure we could accommodate them there. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you can put them in a place where you're going to process them, and anybody that's genuine, you can then welcome them in with open arms. But nobody can tell me that the tens of thousands of young men that are coming here are running away. They're not running away. They're coming here as economic migrants.
Some of them. I'm sure some of them are. I'm sure you're right. Some of them are. But what about the ones that are genuine asylum seekers? Because I do think that, you talk about international law. We do have a duty, if they are genuine, to allow them to stay. And 75% of them are actually given leave to stay. Bob, thank you. Let's go to James, who is in Tunbridge Wells. Hello, James.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, there's a number of things that really come up. The first of all is, I find the expression illegal immigrants is pedantic and is pejorative in tone. And it suggests immediately that everyone who comes across is doing so for some form of nefarious reason.
But some of them are. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. Some of them are not. Some of them are economic migrants. And look, we should be proud as a country that people do want to come here. But the fact is, some of them are not coming over as asylum seekers. They are coming over, and their presence here is illegal. And just as any other country has a right to control its borders, so do we.
Let's talk terms for a second. I'm not disagreeing. We also have a history in this country of economic migration over many, many, many centuries. Let's go back to the Huguenots, for example. Or the
so do most countries.
And so it goes on the whole way through history. Now, the point about it is where do we house them? How do we manage them? First of all, there's a failure of government in terms of processing with a backlog, which has been built up over, several decades with the previous administration, which the current administration is not working its way through as fast as we would like. The second is, how do we dissuade people from wanting to come across as well? The point that, talking to your producer, that I was going to put in the mix is the Danish model. If you look at the Danish model, it's slightly more punitive insofar as, one, it isn't hotels. Secondly, it isn't army barracks in the middle of towns. Instead, these army barracks that they use are in more remote locations, and they are effectively penitentiaries until such time as they're processed. Now, the upside of that is it acts as a deterrent and it has and statistically acted as a deterrent. The downside of that is in our country, we have such a backlog that they become overwhelmed very, very quickly. So there's 2 points to the argument. The first is that if you are to put people in a more remote location, rather than in the middle of a very small rural town, where you're going to put 600 young men, whether they commit crime or not, they are going to create a more threatening environment for the people who live there. This is not a right-wing head-banging perspective. It's just a statement of truth. I have a 14-year-old daughter in Tunbridge Wells. The fact that there are 600 young men with little to do with their time who are getting on and off the bus in and out of Tunbridge Wells, Uckfield, wherever else, is going to, of course, be of a concern to any parent.
I've not actually. As you know, I live just outside Tunbridge Wells, and I drive through Crover quite often. I'm not quite sure exactly how near the town this barracks is, but it is not secure. So
it's not secure. It's right on the edge of town as well. It's not difficult for them to walk into town. It's not difficult for them, frankly, as you know, Iain, for them to walk into Tunbridge Wells. It would take maybe an hour, 45 minutes.
Ooh, a bit longer than that. It's a good 10 miles, isn't it?
But it wouldn't take long. It's the point. I think that you've got to see it from the perspective of local people who live there, who've suddenly, through no choice of their own, have suddenly got an additional concern in their lives. And the other thing is it's going to play to that right-wing forum when, not if, something happens. Statistically, 600 young men, at some point or another, one or two of them, three or four of them, who knows, are going to commit some form of an offence. Hopefully, it's not an offence against person. It might be local shoplifting or crime. However, the finger-waving will start very, very quickly. And it plays right into the hands of those right-wing headbangers that concern us all. And the other point that I'd love to talk about the European Convention on Human Rights and how removing it doesn't actually remove the problem, which is the core reform lie, isn't it? That if we remove the European Convention on Human Rights, then we solve the problem. We haven't, because we still have a problem of deportation and our duties and responsibilities within legal law with the United Nations.
And that, I think, is a key point, because if we have reciprocal returns agreements, like Germany actually has with Afghanistan, there have been thousands of people deported from Germany back to Afghanistan because they've got an agreement with the Afghan government. It's the Taliban government.
It is also a financial agreement, let's not forget, Iain, in terms of returning them to Afghanistan.
Well, that may well be, but they are being returned. Now, if the Germans can do that with the Taliban, surely we can do it with some of the other countries involved.
Oh, completely. And the idea that we can return them and those countries prove to be safe, which unfortunately in the Afghanistan example is not necessarily the case. But when we can prove that they are safe to return to, then that would be reasonable. One of the challenges I have with the debate is it's very difficult to argue with economic migration, the idea of bettering yourself. Let's not forget Norman Tebbit and get on your bike, going back to the Thatcherite years. That very idea of, well, you haven't got a job here, go and find a job somewhere else. That the fact that so that idea of economic migration even is one that we might want to question in terms of them being some form of nefarious, unpleasant operators, unpleasant actors within the system. So but let's go back to, please, what the solution might be to the government. When I listened to the Home Secretary this morning with Nick Ferrari, which I did, the fact that she chose Nick Ferrari than, let's say, James O'Brien tells its own story. But that,
well, to be fair, hang on a second. James O'Brien, he does the phone-in with Sadiq Khan, but he doesn't generally do phone-ins with government ministers.
I know he doesn't.
Nick Ferrari does, because he's the breakfast show.
And Nick Ferrari does, and the hour of the day that he does it makes it more sensible as well. Iain, my point being that Nick Ferrari is relatively potentially centre-right. So his view.
And James, as Corey reminds me, on our show we do news at 7:30, and we've gone 3 minutes over. But you've been a very interesting caller. Thank you very much indeed for phoning in. So let's go to the news headlines before we talk to Simon Marks about the latest on the ICE situation in Minnesota. And I'm not talking about the weather. Amelia Cox has the news headlines.
The Chancellor has told LBC the government wants to stand by pubs after announcing tax relief on changes to their business rates from April. The Treasury says pubs and music venues in England will get 15% off their bills. Storm Chandra's bringing record-breaking river levels with weather warnings for wind and ice in parts of the UK. There's been heavy snow in north-east England and major disruption in Northern Ireland, including the closure of hundreds of schools. And a 14-year-old boy has been charged with causing death by dangerous driving over an e-scooter crash in Greater Manchester. Jacob Calland, who was also 14, died in Wythenshawe last March. LBC weather, rain and strong winds for Scotland tonight, though it will become drier and calmer later. A few showers for southern and western areas, clear elsewhere, lows of -3 degrees.
This is LBC.
During
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:36 on LBC. We'll come back to your calls on where to house asylum seekers in just a moment. But first, let's turn our attention to matters in the United States. Minnesota's top federal judge has summoned the acting head of ICE to appear before him on Friday, warning he may be held in contempt for allegedly defying court orders. And at the same time, ICE apparently are going to send agents to the Winter Olympics. Italy is not pleased. Who do we want to tell us about this? Of course, it's Simon Marks, our US correspondent. Simon, this ICE story, particularly with regard to Minnesota, goes on. And of course, Donald Trump seems to be backing down a little bit.
I am not certain that Donald Trump really is backing down all that much, Ian. I mean, certainly we've seen a head roll in the form of Greg Bovino, the head of the Border Patrol, the swaggering, strutting individual that has been accused for weeks of goading the citizens of Minneapolis and terrorising both immigrants and non-immigrants there, even at one point within the last few days, starting to wander around the city wearing a full-length overcoat that reminded many onlookers of the kind of garments that the SS used to wear in Nazi Germany. He's being removed from Minnesota. He is reportedly losing his commander title within the Border Patrol, and there were also reports last night that his access to social media was being curtailed by the White House. So concerned were they about the depths of the extremism that he has been espousing. But they have sent President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, who himself is no stranger to occasional extremist outbursts. He's the man who threatened last year to arrest the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, when they were pushing back against ICE operations on the streets of Los Angeles. Today, leaving the White House, it was notable that President Trump avoided answering a direct question that he was asked by a reporter, and you'll have to put up with the noise of Marine One in the background as we play you this clip.
Do you believe that Alex Pretty's death was justified?
Well, you know, we're doing a big investigation. I want to see the investigation. I'm going to be watching over it. I want a very honorable and honest investigation. I have to see it myself.
Does he know I'm going to step down?
No.
Was Alex Pretty's killing last Saturday justified? The president sidestepped the question. He was asked later if he thought that Mr. Pretty had been an assassin, as his own Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, has claimed. The president briefly said no, but then immediately went on to say, but you can't walk in with guns. You can't bring guns to the streets of Minneapolis, which is only further going to enrage the pro-gun lobby here, because they argue that Mr. Pretty was carrying, as he was, a legally permitted handgun, and certainly wasn't brandishing it at the Border Patrol, as President Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, has suggested. You heard there, she is staying in post. More lies today from her deputy, Tricia McLaughlin, appearing on Fox News.
I pray every morning and every night for Alex Pretty and his family. This was completely preventable, and we never want to see a loss of life. And it is a reminder that when you do obstruct lawful operations, especially if you're armed, it's dangerous and it can be deadly. You have the right to practice your First Amendment, of course, and your Second Amendment rights, but do so responsibly and without breaking federal law.
Now, of course, there's no indication that Mr. Pretty was breaking any federal law on Saturday when he was gunned down by those Border Patrol agents, nor that he was trying to interfere with law enforcement activities. He was simply exercising his legal right to observe those activities and to record them on his cell phone camera. We also heard today from the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump. As you know, she is promoting her new documentary all about her. And she appeared on Fox News this morning and, of course, was asked about the crisis in Minneapolis.
I'm calling for unity. I know my husband, the president, had a great call yesterday with the governor and the mayor, and they're working together to make it peaceful and without riots. I'm against the violence. So if we protest in peace.
And of course, Mr. Preti was doing precisely that on Saturday. Melania Trump's documentary opening this weekend in movie theatres all over the United States. And as in the UK, there are still plenty of tickets available for it, Iain. So if you want to go and see it, the opportunity is arising.
Well, I'm sure you'll be first in the queue, Simon. But tell us why the Italians are angry.
Well, the Italians are angry because it has been announced that ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division of the US government, which of course is responsible for the killing of Renee Good, the 37-year-old US citizen killed in Minneapolis earlier this month, are going to be accompanying the US delegation to the Winter Olympics in Italy next month. According to the State Department, ICE agents will join a security team there to vet and mitigate risks as national criminal organisations. That's actually a statement that was put out by Tricia McLaughlin, the Assistant Secretary at the Homeland Security Ministry. All security operations will remain under Italian authority. The statement added that ICE does not conduct immigration enforcement operations in foreign countries. So what they mean about vetting and mitigating risks from transnational criminal organisations at the Winter Olympics is unclear. Maybe the Cosa Nostra is going to target the Winter Olympics, masquerade as a bobsledding team. I'm not sure, but the Italians are not happy, and the mayor in Italy of the host city is making it absolutely clear in Milan that they are not going to be welcome to join the American.
Well, I think ICE have been interfering with our line there, Simon, I think, but just about held out. Simon, thank you very much indeed. That's Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question at 8. We have the Labour MP for Bolsover, Natalie Fleet, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, Paralympic gold medalist, Neil Shastri Hurst, who is Conservative MP for Solihull West and Shirley, and Joe Tanner, political communications strategist. They'll all be here to answer your questions from 8. You can phone in with your questions in advance of that. Let's take a couple of texts before we go to a break. And this one is from John, who says asylum seekers aren't illegal immigrants. No, we did talk about that earlier. This rhetoric is damagingly reckless and stupid. 10 years of this nonsense rhetoric, where did it get us? Nowhere. We need to stop treating these idiots as having legitimate concerns. They created the small boats crisis by calling for safe legal routes to be closed. Asylum centres closed. They can't complain now. I'm not sure who they is, John, if I'm totally honest. And Neil goes back to what Bob was saying about tents on a remote Scottish island. Is that really the best that we can do? I think we can do a little bit better than that, can't we? 0345 6060 973. Where should we be housing asylum seekers if it isn't in hotels or army barracks? It's 7:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
It's called the Cabinet exclusively here on LBC with the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who is in the studio with me. Sue is in Crowborough. Sue, you're on the radio. Your question to the Home Secretary.
It's your policy to continue to move illegal immigrant men into sites like the Crowborough Cadet Training Camp. How will you keep the residents of Crowborough safe?
We are working closely with the police. We're working closely with the local authority.
And you've had a conversation with the Chief Constable. Do you expect increased policing of some form in Crowborough?
I haven't spoken to the Chief Constable directly myself. I will do. The Policing Minister and the Immigration Minister are all talking to the local authorities.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
At
Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
Gavin says these migrants are effectively in a prison. Well, not in Crowborough, they're not. He says, just look at HMP Haverig, a former military camp with billets. The government just overlooked the importance of renaming it as a prison for optics amateurs. However, the protesters won't be happy until migrants of every sort are taken directly to a cheese wall. I have no idea what a cheese wall is. So we similarly must stop appeasing these people and get on with practical, cost-effective and kind solutions. Well, that is the typical comment of a bleeding heart liberal who criticises everything but comes up with no solution. What do you mean by get on with practical, cost-effective and kind solutions? Well, give me a solution then, because you haven't done. All you've done is rant against the politicians who've made these choices which you disagree with. I may disagree with them. I mean, come up with some solutions. That was the whole point of this hour. Les is in Cambridge. Les, hi.
Hi, Ian. Well, it went to my mind that I think we've all heard over decades the top priority of any government is the safety and security of its citizens. They all tell us that. So we then bring people we don't know into the country. Well, we don't bring them in. They come in on the boats. We then put them in a camp where they can come and go as they wish. So might be a kinder approach, as your previous comment was. How about we have two types of accommodation? If you decide to ditch your passport, identification papers, and anything that we can say who you are with on the way over, you will go into accommodation like this camp, but the gates are locked until you are processed. If, however, you decide to come with your passport and identification papers, that we can do background checks on, see if you're a criminal or an undesirable or perfectly legitimate, you could go into one where you can come and go as you wish. How does that sound?
That sounds perfectly sensible to me.
Because we know they're ditching their paperwork because they don't want to be identified. Well, the rules are, if we can't identify you, in you go, doors shut. Well, not the door, the gate. You can still have the freedom of a very large and nice camp, like I used to have as a military individual. But you can't go into the local towns and villages because we don't know who you are.
Well, I mean, I can't see any great objection to that, because if you deliberately throw away your papers and nobody has any idea, I mean, you're doing that for a reason. You've got something to hide. So therefore, you're somebody who probably can't be trusted. And therefore, I think you deserve to be detained in a secure establishment. And you can call it what you like, whether it's a military barracks or a prison. I don't really mind.
No. So, you came over on a small boat because there were no legal routes that you could take. However, you brought everything with you. We can do the checks. It will fasten the process of, processing people through the system as well, wouldn't it? So that's their choice.
Well, as I say, it sounds perfectly sensible to me. Les, thank you very much indeed. Now, as you know, today is International Holocaust Memorial Day. We're going to be joined now by Helen Hodinott, LBC's reporter, speaking to us from some commemorations in central London. And of course, at 9 o'clock, Dov Foreman, a leading campaigner against anti-Semitism, he'll be with us for the hour taking your calls. Helen, what's going on where you are?
Ian, the countdown's now on ahead of 8 o'clock when candles will be put in windows and monuments will be lit up across the country, including the London landmark where I am right now, to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, 81 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. But this morning, the National Memorial Ceremony was held in Westminster, attended by faith leaders, politicians from across the divide, household names, and most importantly, survivors of the Holocaust, sadly getting fewer and fewer in their number. I spoke to 90-year-old survivor Stephen Frank, BEM, whose father was murdered in Auschwitz. He told me a remarkable story about his mother, who managed to sneak into his father's camp after he was taken to see him one last time.
My mother, who was now, of course, left with 3 young children, found out who the cleaners in this camp were and changed places with one of those cleaners and went into that prison disguised as a man, and while scrubbing the floors, spoke with him. And he said, yes, he'd been tortured, but he'd given nothing away. And that was the last time she saw him.
So a remarkable story of bravery. The ceremony opened this afternoon with the chair of the Holocaust Memorial Trust and former Tory Minister Sajid Javid's opening remarks. He said that anti-Semitism has reached shocking levels and that we must remember the past and protect the future. There was music performed, videos were played out in which Holocaust survivors recounted being children when Nazi persecution began. And then Steve Reed, Secretary of State for Housing and Communities, told the audience that for the first time in history this morning, a Holocaust survivor addressed the cabinet. Marla Tribeck, MBE, urged the government to do what needs to be done to tackle anti-Semitism in the UK. Steve Reed said that despite memories of the past, we are seeing fewer schools marking Holocaust Memorial Day, Jewish students being targeted on campus because of their faith, schools, synagogues and community centres surrounded by barbed wire. He said that rise in anti-Semitic hatred led to the recent atrocities, including at Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester on Yom Kippur and on Bondi Beach during Hanukkah. The Chief Rabbi, Sir Ephraim Mervis, told me today these recent events reinforce the importance of learning the lessons of history.
Today highlights the very fact that unfortunately, with the end of the Holocaust, hatred didn't end. We are exceptionally concerned about a significant increase of Jew hatred right around the world, and there is a desperate need for education, for reminders and for teaching people of the dangers of hatred.
So, as I say, Ian, at 8 p.m, very soon now, people across the country will be taking part in the Light the Darkness event. They're asked to safely light a candle, place it in their windows to remember the millions killed in the Holocaust and to show solidarity with people facing prejudice today.
Helen, thank you very much indeed. That's Helen Hodinot, LBC's reporter, speaking to us from central London. Right, let's go back to your calls and messages on where we should be housing asylum seekers. Nathaniel says, what fresh hell is this? What disgusting, racist dog whistle enabling from you? How you can translate anything that I've said in this hour into that, only you can know, Nathaniel, because if you're saying that it's racist to say that people who haven't got papers should be held in secure accommodation, then I feel very sorry for you, because I don't care whether they're white, brown, black, whatever. If you can't account for where you've come from or who you are, of course you should be detained by the authorities if you've come here either illegally or you're claiming asylum. That is not racist. That is just common sense. Robert's in East Grinstead. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Ian. Hi. I know Crowborough. It only recently became a town, actually. Well, not that long ago. So it is really it's still a large village. It's very nice. Arthur Conan Doyle lived there, I think, actually, as well. It's got some lovely rocks nearby, and it's near Ashdown Forest. It's a lovely, smart town, and this has been done once again without consultation. I think more shockingly, it's been. In some ways it's a lot better because, like someone I heard earlier, in using an army barracks, they can't advertise, like the Copthorne Hotel, you're going to go to a hotel with a grand piano that was in the reception, with an old 1930s car at the gates. You're not taking, the criminals can't take the total mick, As to right-wing headbangers, right-wing headbangers are everywhere now, on the left, on the right, 80%.
You can't have a right-wing headbanger on the left.
Well, I know what you say, yeah, fair enough. But look, once these asylum seekers, the ones that are legit, once they sort of actually get processed and go here, they'll probably get a job, maybe get a cheap car, and they'll drive just sort of a quarter of a mile to Ashdown Forest, and they'll park there, and they'll discover that some right-wing headbanger has fitted a payment for parking at the forest now. This is the country we live in, where, for the last 5 years, we've spawned idiots at the top. I've spawned a system of, little idiots who are sort of making life hell for us all. So once they sort of, as I say, once the ones that are processed...
Sorry, I'm not being funny, but what is right-wing headbanger What's that got to do with having parking permits in Ashdown Forest?
It's a mentality that transcends politics. So it's a mentality of, look, if we can make life difficult for people...
No, that's jumped-up bureaucrats. That's not right-wing headbangers.
Well, I would say that the people at the top, whether they're right-wing or left-wing, for the last 5 years have just lost the plot of the country. Sir Keir, God bless him, is not in touch with reality. I've been following the conversation all today, all in and out during the whole day. At one point, I heard Sheila Fogarty asking people what they thought of a UK ICE force, being set up in the country. I can't think of anything more terrible. You just need to enforce rules at the Channel. If they had an ICE force, it sounds ridiculous. I'm going to be deliberately ridiculous.
Well, we do have an ICE force. It's just not called that. It's called immigration control and border policing. And there are people who are enforcing the law on our borders, believe it or not. It's just that they don't go around shooting people, seemingly rather indiscriminately. Robert, thank you very much indeed. Coming up on Cross Question, on our panel, Natalie Fleet, the Labour MP for Bolsover, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, Paralympic legend, that's what I'm calling her tonight, and Dr Neil Shastri Hurst, MP, he's Conservative MP for Solihull West and Shirley, and Joe Tanner, the political communications strategist. They're here to answer your calls on 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number, you can text 84850, and of course, if you're not watching us already on Global Player, the LBC app or the LBC YouTube channel, please do so, because Cross Question is even more entertaining in vision than it is in audio. 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, landmarks and iconic buildings across the UK are being lit up in purple right now for a national moment in remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust. The Light the Darkness event is taking place on Holocaust Memorial Day. Today marks 81 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. Olivia Marks-Waldman is from the trust that organises the remembrance events, including one this evening in Westminster.
It's really significant to have so many survivors of the Holocaust and refugees from Nazi persecution together with us. This national ceremony is for the nation, but it is also to honour them and their experiences.
Earlier, the King and Queen held a reception at Buckingham Palace for Holocaust survivors. Pubs and music venues in England will get 15% off their business rates bills from April, following concerns over closures and job losses. The Treasury says the support will be worth £1,650 for the average pub next year. Ben Guerin built a website that used official data to show which pubs would have been most affected by business rate rises. He was surprised at what it showed.
Not just by how many pubs had such a massive increase in their rateable value, but also by how strange the formula seemed to be. You might have two pubs on the same street, one that's gone up barely at all, about 20% maybe, and the one next door has gone up 300-400%.
More than 90 flood warnings are in place in England and Wales, with travel disruption expected to last into tomorrow following Storm Chandra. It's brought heavy rain and strong winds. Hundreds of schools have been closed and people have had to be rescued from their cars in Devon and Somerset. George Dart had to canoe over fields to get to work near Exeter this morning.
This area is a floodplain, so it floods probably once or twice a year and gets as bad as this probably once every 15 years. We've got videos of my dad water skiing 30 years ago on the fields here. So luckily, there is another route to the business.
The chief federal judge in Minnesota has ordered the head of the US ICE department to appear before him on Friday. It follows the deaths of two people in Minneapolis at the hands of federal officers. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 58 points at 10,207. The pound buys $1.37 and €1.15. LBC weather, rain and strong winds for Scotland tonight, though it will become drier and calmer later. A few showers for southern and western areas, clear elsewhere, lows of -3. Bright spells for much of Scotland tomorrow, but cloudy and wet in the northeast. Patchy cloud and sunshine elsewhere, a high of 10. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's Cross Question on LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 3 minutes past 8. Joining me on the panel today, to my left, Natalie Fleet, who is Labour MP for Bolsover. Next to her, making his debut, is Neil Shastri-Hurst MP. He's MP for Solihull West and Shirley. To my right, Jo Tanner, political communication strategist. And to her right, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, 11-time Paralympic gold medalist. You don't get many of them to the pound, do you? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you'd like to put a question to our panel. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
And just before we come to your questions, as we just heard about 10 minutes ago from our reporter Helen Hodinott, people all over the country are lighting candles to put in their windows. Lots of landmarks are being lit up in the colour purple tonight to commemorate International Holocaust Memorial Day. And we're going to be talking about this a lot after 9 with Dov Foreman, whose grandmother was an Auschwitz survivor, appeared on my programme a couple of years ago, but she's sadly passed away since then. So I just want to go around the panel and just ask you this. Why is it so important that every year we do commemorate this day, the liberation of Auschwitz, and the fact that 6 million Jews and also many gypsies, many homosexuals also lost their lives in the Holocaust? Tanni, let's start with you, and many disabled people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just, the horror of war and how easy it becomes for a nation to slip into doing absolutely abhorrent things. And I did a politics degree my final year. We did Nazism, and I remember, at the time, way before social media, and showing, videos of, and as like a 20-year-old, it's the first time I'd kind of seen any of that and being absolutely, beyond horrified by it. But I think it just shows how easily it is to slip into it, and then I spent some time in Rwanda, and the international world arguing whether it was genocide or whether it was civil war, and then finally, decided it was genocide. It just shows how easy it can be for things to go hugely wrong. I just don't think we should ever forget, what happened.
Jo?
Well, it strikes me this is probably even more important this year than it has been for many years. And if anything, it's, we've got Jewish people that are scared to wear a Star of David. We've got attacks that have happened at places of worship, like the idea that this is something that it is in the past, something that happened so many years ago. The fact is, it is if it was a virus, it's something that's sort of awake again. I think I saw something Boris Johnson had written, actually, sort of making a point that he'd met someone, talking to someone who'd said that they feel afraid to be Jewish. And the idea that is something that's happening this day and age is a reminder of how we should be reminded of how serious things could get. And let's hope it doesn't get to that. But, there are definitely signs that we should be worried.
Natalie?
I grew up as well doing about the Holocaust in history, and I genuinely thought that's where it was left. And then, as she just said, this is worse now that anti-Semitism is on the rise in the UK and around the world, and it's really important that we take this time to commemorate and think about how difficult it is, but also the Jewish constituents that are living smaller lives than they have before because they're living in fear. That nothing about that is okay.
Neil?
History has a nasty habit of repeating itself, and it repeats itself when we don't reflect upon what's happened before. And I think by marking these painful milestones, it makes us reflect on the evil that took place in the world, but often it's not just evil, it's people who went along with it. It was that silent group who didn't stand up against things when they knew they were wrong, but they felt a pressure associated with it. And I think particularly given the last couple of years, and the Jewish community have faced a lot of hostility and a lot of violence towards them, particularly on the back of the Bondi Beach attacks that we saw just before the new year. I think it's a really important time that we are showing that solidarity with the Jewish people of this country. I know that in my own constituents, they value that. And I think if we forget, then we just allow history to repeat itself again.
It is interesting to note that there are actually only about 250,000 or 270,000 Jewish people in the UK, whereas I think most people imagine it's sort of several million. But they, as Joe, you said, they feel unsafe at the moment, and any community in this country should not feel that way. Well, as I say, we're going to talk a lot more about that after 9 on the show, so maybe you'd like to talk to Dov Foreman himself and put your questions and views to him. Right, let's continue with the text question from Alistair in Horsham. He says, is today's business rates decision yet another U-turn from this flip-flop Labour government? Well, the Chancellor, I think, announced today that there's going to be a 15% business rates rebate for pubs. I think it's just pubs, but, I mean, Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it is another flip-flop, isn't it? You can't sort of describe it in any other way.
However we describe it, I am really pleased with the outcome in today's announcement. So in my community, like communities up and down the country, there were small businesses, there were pubs that have been the lifeblood of our community for so long, that are so important, that we're saying, Doc, I'm struggling. And I'm struggling to the point where we've had, damaging economic policies over such a long time that have made things so difficult. We understand that you're trying to make things better for us now, and you've put support in place, but things are really difficult for us because of this business rates reassessment. So the measures that we've taken today, on top of the measures that we took in the budget, mean that pubs this year are going to be £1,650 better off. We cannot have pubs, the few that are left in our communities, closing down because it is just not possible for them to.
But they're still saying this isn't enough.
So it's a huge package. It means that there'll be a 15% cut in business rates this year. There'll be a 2-year real term freeze. It will have an impact. It's on top of the measures we've already announced. And we are doing everything that we can to make sure that the cost of living is tackled as well. The reason that is so important is because we want people to have money in their pockets to be able to go and drink in these pubs and eat in them too. So in April, when the national living wage goes up and people start to feel the money in their pay packets, this, as Keir Starmer said, is the year of delivery. We want people to start feeling better off so that they can be in our small businesses.
But why restrict it just to pubs? I mean, if you run a small restaurant, you're going to have the same business rates problem that a pub has. A retail shop on a high street is going to have the same problem. Why single out pubs?
So I asked this exact question, and I've learned a lot about business rates as a result. So I thought that everybody's was calculated in the same way. They aren't. So the way that if you own a cafe or a hospitality venue, it goes on the size, whereas if you are a pub, your business rates are calculated on not just the size, but also the potential turnover. That is why pubs have been struggling more than anybody else. That's why they specifically need the additional support.
Neil.
Well, it is another U-turn, let's be honest about it, and it's indicative of a government that don't think through the policies before putting them into fruition. It's welcome, but it's nowhere near far enough. It's a sticking plaster and it's a short-term gain. You've touched on it, Ian, it's not just the pub sector. The pubs are really important, not just because I like to go for a pint in them, but they're actually the heart of the community. It's about that fabric of society. But it's also the restaurants, it's music venues, it's cafes, and the independent cafes in my constituency are struggling. The restaurants are struggling. And they feel as though they have been not recognised within this. Yes, it's good news for pubs. Could go further. We would scrap business rates entirely.
You had so long to do that, though. Please just take some accountability for the reason they are struggling is because they got here. We've been in government for 18 months, and the decisions we are making today will have a future impact. But why are they struggling so much? Why did the cost of living get so bad? Liz Truss and a mini budget had such a massive impact on us all.
Well, we hear the line about Liz Truss and a mini budget.
It wasn't a line, it was £400 extra every month on my mortgage.
Let's look where inflation was on the day of the general election in 2024. It was smack bang on 2%. Where is it now? It's around 3.5%.
We've had 5 cuts to interest rates since we got into
Natalie,
power.
to be fair, Neil didn't interrupt you.
Sorry.
I was very polite.
Absolutely.
The other issue, of course, is around young people finding jobs. Now, my first job was in a pub. lots of young people go into the hospitality sector, and if we're not supporting them getting onto that ladder, having that sense of financial independence, getting into the job market, taking that responsibility, we're doing them a great disservice. And if we're not supporting the hospitality industry across the board, not just the pub sector, but restaurants, cafes, bars, etc., we're not getting those young people who are going to get out into the workforce, and there are too many young people who aren't working. And let's remember, over the last year, a pub a day has been closing. We've got to make sure we're supporting our hospitality industry.
Ever work in a pub, Natalie?
I did, yeah. It was cool.
Me too. You, Joe?
Yep. I talk too much, though.
Tanny?
No, I spent most of my early years as an athlete, so I didn't even go into a pub. So I wasn't much use to anyone at all, so sorry.
Right, Joe, let's address this question. Is this the 14th or 15th U-turn? And if it is, should it be welcomed?
Count. I mean, I come from the view that if you get it wrong, then you should turn around and get it right. I don't believe that you should just blindly go on when a policy is not right. The problem that I have is, we have a budget where, in the run up to the budget, no one can talk because it's all about what's going to be in the budget. And then the budget is all about the balance that government is striking across all these different decisions that they have to make. But then in the weeks and months after the budget, it all starts to unravel. So what happened to that huge, big calculation, which is so important that no one can talk about it in the run-up to a budget because it's such an important sort of set of figures that are put on either side of a spreadsheet and the big red book that we literally can see it all start to unravel so fast. And I think it is important to be able to change course when wrong, but the damage is done. The damage is done because you look like you were attacking a sector. You look like you were attacking a group of businesses or a group of individuals. The damage, therefore, is done in terms of the trust, in terms of the fact that you're not important enough or your case is not important enough and that you have to fight so hard where, really quite desperate stories we've heard from some publicans that have spoken about what's going to happen to them. And actually, the best bit of all this is if you actually go into the detail, which I tend to avoid, Ian, because some of it's really above my intellectual level. But when you look at the government, what they put out about how the relief will work and what they're doing, it's just so confusing. And yet again, you go back into the question of why is our tax system just so hard to navigate? Because then it's like, well, we're taking a bit off here and you've got some relief there. And if you qualify for this because of this, because if you serve food or you don't serve food, and we almost go back to the omnishambles of George Osborne and a pasty and whether it was heated or not.
Caravan
and you just
tax.
think, why is it that this stuff has to be so complicated? And that's half the reason that people hate politicians.
You're so right. I remember at the time of the last budget, I said to both Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, and the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith, I said, I've got a really good policy that you could have, which would be really popular. It wouldn't cost you a penny. Why don't you commit to making the tax code the same size as it was in 1997? Because at the moment, it's like 20,000 pages. Well, none of us are going to go through 20,000 pages. We can't understand it. It's just a gift for accountants and lawyers, isn't it? And if you went back, I mean, I think the tax code in 1997 was 7,000 pages. So it wasn't as, still too much, but it would cost nothing to do. And simplification, I would have thought, would be a good idea. But they just nodded their head politely as if I was mad.
And we've had consultations on simplifying the tax system, but how many people actually can manage their finances and work out and forecast what their business is going to spend or what they need to bring in when the system is so hard? And if you have to pay a load of money for someone to help you work that all out, then it's just a false economy.
Tanny.
Well, it feels like we're a bit like death by consultation at the moment as well. So, I don't have a geographical constituency, but I talk to people from all over the country, and a lot of people, I think, are just a bit exhausted. And whenever a budget comes out, most papers will do, the winners and the losers. And I think, right, the system is way too complicated. But it feels like, and I can't believe, I'm asking, we need to have better impact assessments. To actually understand how some of these policies are going to work their way through. Because I don't think it does anyone good to talk about U-turns. It's not good for the government. And I think we're in we're in strange political times in the UK and internationally. But what I'm really worried about with all this is actually how more and more people I talk to are either saying they're not going to vote in the next local, if they're going to have them, elections or general elections, because they're just completely exhausted, probably by people like us, spending all our time talking about it and then trying to justify whether it's U-turn or not U-turn. But, Neil said about young people, my daughter's 23. Most of her friends are struggling to get jobs. They're struggling to get housing. They're just about on minimum wage. And, for them, they just don't see a way out of it. So to even have disposable income, to be able to go to a pub, is kind of quite a treat for them. These are all university graduates, bright. 20 years ago, they'd expected by now to maybe at least be in an okay paying job. So the problems, I think, just go way deeper through the whole of society. It just feels like we're all in a bit of a mess at the moment.
Well, and also, we talked about this on the programme last night, that we're all becoming hermits. We like staying at home more than we ever used to, so we don't go out so much. So therefore, we're not spending money in restaurants and pubs in the same way that we used to.
And we lose those communication skills that actually, you get through customer service. Being in a bar situation, being in a restaurant, all those environments where it is casual labour for young people, but they're valuable communication skills that we need in businesses, and they're not getting them.
Until you pay. Right, let's move on to another subject in just a few moments' time. It's 19 minutes past 8.
The new LBC app. News your way. This is LBC. Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
20 past 8 on LBC. We have Labour MP Natalie Fleet here, Conservative MP Neil Shastri-Hurst, Joe Tanner, political communication strategist, and Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, 11-time Paralympic gold medalist and disability rights campaigner and crossbench peer. Right, a question from Michael in Dover. What would you like to ask, Michael? Good evening.
Good evening. Would the panel agree with me it makes no difference whatsoever whether migrants are accommodated in hotels, barracks or on cruise ships? The bottom line is they have to be managed, the accommodation has to be managed professionally and appropriately to ensure the welfare of those that are accommodated.
Well, thanks for that, Michael. Protests have been taking place in the East Sussex town of Crowborough after the government started housing asylum seekers in a military training camp. Plans announced back in October could mean that up to 500 males could be located there rather than using hotels. At the moment, there are only 27. Neil?
Well, I think there are two parts to this question for Michael. I think firstly there's dealing with the root problem, and that's having a tough policy around illegal immigration in this country, and we've put forward proposals around banning asylum claims from those that enter the country illegally, We've set out our reasons for leaving the ECHR to give us more flexibility about how we manage the migrant crisis, having a removals force and having more robust returns agreements with other nations. And I think
you mean all of these things that didn't happen under Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman?
Yeah, look,
they've been welcomed into reform.
I'm quite honest about it. I wasn't a member of Parliament at that stage, but we didn't get it right. We clearly didn't get it right, and that's why we are facing the problem that we have now. And this government hasn't got it right. If they come up with the right proposals, I think it's absolutely in the national interest that we should support them. But where they're not getting it right, then we have to challenge them and hold their feet to the fire. There's the second issue about what you do with those who have come here illegally. Now, it's absolutely right that those individuals have to be detained and they have to be kept in a secure environment whilst they're processed. Now,
what does that mean, secure environment, though? Because these barracks in Crowborough are not secure. There's a front gate, but it's not secure around the perimeter.
Precisely. So... And I think there are a number of reasons why this is not a appropriate site. It was previously rejected. You've talked about the security of the perimeter. There's a significant cost in developing the site to make it fit for purpose. And of course, it's incredibly close to the town itself, which is a very modest-sized town, and that does affect the fabric of the community. So we've got to be very careful when we're changing policies of where we are housing asylum seekers or illegal immigrants in order to process them, that we don't go from the frying pan to the fire. But clearly the hotel arrangement is less than ideal, but if we go to things like HMOs and we go to other methods without thinking them through, there is a risk that we make the situation worse. And what's particularly noticeable about the Crowborough site is that there was an absence of consultation with the local people. And I think if you're going to put these proposals forward, you've got to take the local community with you, because otherwise it does lead to significant
But there isn't a single local community in the country that would say, oh yeah, let's bring people in here.
You've got to at least engage with them, Ian, haven't you? Because if you don't have those conversations and set out how you're going to make it as secure as possible and provide some reassurance, of course, everybody's going to be nervous around this. But if you have no consultation at all, people are operating in the dark, and that does make the situation much, much worse.
Tanny?
I don't think the hotels are working for anybody. I ended up staying in a hotel actually 2 years ago that was partly used for migrants and lots of old ladies on a bus trip around the country. And it was a completely surreal experience. And I'd say for me, it's
almost a reality TV show.
It was beyond strange, but I feel really bad saying this. It's probably the only place I've ever stayed in a hotel in the UK where I didn't feel safe. Because of how the hotel and how it was set up, and people on corridors and outside the door, and so that's just like my one personal experience. But I think we just need to think about what we're trying to get from this, and I think there are two parts to it: the people who are here legally and the people who are here illegally, and I think that all just gets wrapped up into one conversation in terms of. And I've had a reasonable number of emails from people who live in close proximity to migrant hotels who are saying they don't feel safe, they don't feel their children, certainly they don't feel their daughters are safe, but then this gets whipped up by the media as well. So, we don't seem to be fixing the problem.
When you say
actually,
whipped
the number
up
of people
by the
coming
media, I mean, yes, the media does report on these cases where people who are claiming asylum have committed criminal offences, sometimes being sent to prison.
Or not.
Or not.
Yep.
And, I mean, we can't not report those things, but inevitably that leads to people thinking, well, this is happening all over the place, when maybe it isn't.
Well, I don't think it is happening all over the place, but I don't think you can actually, deny that people where these places are feel very worried and concerned about what's happening. So, and I think, when you've got cases where somebody's committed a criminal activity and then there's no action taken, I don't think that helps either. We come back to, all the promises about going to stop the boats. I doesn't feel like any progress is being made there either. And I think this is where, people feel... I feel really uncomfortable talking about this subject. I wouldn't have chosen to talk about this on air because I know my inbox tomorrow will be full of people calling me racist or not racist or, thinking I'm saying the right thing. So it's a really horrible one to talk about. That's the problem, isn't it?
If we don't talk about it, people will then say, well, the media's hiding away from this because they're too scared to talk about it. So
you can't win.
You can't win, and particularly if a caller calls in with a question, we have to take it.
Absolutely.
Joe?
I think the points that have been made about the two points to this, two sides to it, are right. The challenge is that if people feel the system is out of control, if people feel that the numbers of people coming in or how the processing is happening, if it's felt that it's not being properly controlled, then I think that adds to the concern about people that then end up in the community, because there's a sense of who's being monitored, or how are people sort of being encouraged to behave appropriately in local communities, or are they just sort of picked up and dumped somewhere? So I can understand that, Michael's sort of question of, would a cruise ship help? Because then you can literally just put them all on a boat, and what do? Do you just leave it offshore a bit, so it's harder for people to then...
We had a caller earlier who said halfway across the channel.
And then what? Do we intercept the boats halfway and then just put them straight on a cruise ship? Like, how does this work? The reality of all of this is there is no ideal solution, but also what is currently happening is not good enough. And the idea that we're now going to be using, army accommodation or training camps or whatever, we might need those. We might actually be needing those because we are in such a precarious situation.
Here, apparently, a load of cadets have been displaced, so that's another part of the equation.
Perhaps we need those cadets actually doing their training with the right facilities, because we are living in very precarious times. So what happens if we fill all these facilities around the country with people? Then what happens when we need to quickly start mobilising because something's happened? What do we do then?
Natalie.
So...
That's
the second side from our panel on this subject.
Because this is such a massive issue, and I am pleased that we're talking about it. In the run-up to the general election last year, there were three big issues: cost of living, the NHS, and immigration. And there is nothing racist about people in my community being really, really concerned about immigration. It went out of control. There were 400 hotels that were being used to house asylum seekers. My daughter just booked a hotel. It got cancelled because they needed it for asylum seekers. It was costing the taxpayer £9 million every day. There was no control over our borders. There was no fair system for anybody. And we've got people that are looking across Europe and thinking, we're going to make a really difficult journey. We are going to travel to the UK because they're really soft on immigration. We have got to a system where we've let human traffickers control our asylum policy and who is and isn't here. Wages being undercut as well as the expense to the taxpayer. The fact that we had this crazy Rwanda gimmick, which was ridiculous and people didn't believe on the doorstep. But now Reform, the party that say they will control immigration, have taken Jenrick and Braverman, the architects of the hotel system, is just ridiculous. Instead, I am pleased that we are taking proper action, adult, sensible action to make sure that where there are foreign criminals, they are deported, that you can't bring your entire family with you, that we're going to make sure that if you're going to come and settle in this country, it's going to be a privilege, not a right, and you're going to have good English and you're going to be able to work and support yourself. If you come here on a boat illegally, we are not going to put you up in a hotel. We are going to put you up in this accommodation. And most importantly, we are going to make sure that you're processed and removed, like the 50,000 people we have already since the general election. We're working with France to make sure that we have a fair system. By the next election, I think that people will look at the record of what we've achieved. They will see that the alternative was the Boris wave, where people were coming in unfiltered and there was just too many people that we couldn't control.
The numbers, though, coming across the channel are higher than they were last year.
We have looked like a soft touch, easy country for far too long. We have got to tackle the root causes, smash the asylum system, the gangs, and we've got to make sure that we don't look like a really easy country to come to with a great black market where you can go, do some work, get a good amount of money, live in a hotel, not pay tax. We've got to take a multi-pronged approach.
Neil, presumably you agree with all of that.
I agree with the sentiment. We've got to deal with it. If we don't deal with it, it's going to become the overarching political issue that faces this country. We've seen the fabric of society being stretched by it and torn in some places. And if we don't get a grip of it, we're going to see much, much worse. So absolutely. And that's why I've said, if the government come up with workable proposals, I think it's the responsibility of a sensible opposition to work with the government to refine that detail, to deliver on it. If we don't, then I'm afraid we open up the door for parties like Reform, who are not interested in actually solving problems, but more interested in putting the incendiary devices underneath the conversation. But I think a lot of this, and I just want to pick up on something Joe said, is not just around the security and people feeling safe. It's about people feeling there's fairness in the system, that if you've played by the rules and you've done the right thing, you are not compromised. And at the moment, it feels as though individuals who haven't abided by the asylum rules, they've come over here, they are getting an easier ride than those people who are born and brought up here or who have come here legally, who graft to put food on their table and to make the best of their families.
Just to round this off, I mean, Natalie, your rhetoric on this is I don't think I've heard anyone articulate it, another Labour MP articulated in the way you have. I mean, I think you're absolutely right to do it, but David here is saying, when is the beast of Bolsover, by which I assume he means you, defecting to Reform?
I get asked that regularly, and I find it really offensive.
By Nigel Farage.
He hasn't actually asked me.
Have you not had your call yet?
We had a chat last Tuesday, and then he realised that it was a joke and wasn't actually going, no, said it live on air now. So I think that when we don't make these left-wing arguments for tackling one of the biggest things that's raised by our community, we leave the door open to Reform. We cannot take Reform seriously when they've got failed Tories that made such a mess and cause these problems now being the solution to them. That's ridiculous. Turquoise Tories, no, I have no time for them. But it's not a right-wing issue to want to be tough on migration and have control of our borders. Okay. We should have control and we should have a fair system, and I think that we can all agree on that.
OK, Michael, thank you very much for that call. Provoked a good discussion. We'll have more good discussions in just a moment on LBC. It's 8:34. News headlines with Matt Hewitt.
In the last half hour, landmarks and iconic buildings across the UK have been lit up in purple for a national moment in remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust. The Light the Darkness event on Holocaust Memorial Day marks 81 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. The Chancellor has told LBC the government wants to back pubs after announcing tax relief on changes to their business rates from April. The Treasury says pubs and music venues in England will get 15% off their bills. And forecasters have warned of possible further disruption as Storm Chandra continues to track across Northern Ireland. Wind and rain warnings are in place there and in parts of Scotland until midnight. LBC weather, those stormy conditions will start to die out in the next few hours. A few showers for southern and western areas, clear elsewhere, lows of -3. Bright spells for much of Scotland tomorrow, but cloudy and wet in the northeast, and patchy cloud and sunshine elsewhere, a high of 10.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
We're asking if Trump has had a change of heart or perhaps just a change of mind about the ICE agents' tactics on the streets of Minneapolis. Is he losing this battle?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
During
Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:37. Now, we're running a little bit late because of the length of our previous discussion, which is my fault for not controlling you all. So the next question, if we can keep it relatively brief, though it is a very difficult subject. Let me reintroduce the panel. Natalie Fleet is Labour MP for Bolsover, and she's not a beast. Is there a female version of a beast? I don't think there is there? Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, 11-time Paralympic gold medalist, crossbench peer. Neil Shastri Hurst MP, doctor. So are you a medical doctor?
I am, yes, yeah.
Which bit?
So I was a surgeon before I came into politics, with a bit of a segue around the law.
What?
So I was a barrister.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Segue.
Right, OK, I get you.
Spare time?
He's Conservative MP for Solihull West and Shirley. It reminds me of the film Airplane. Stop calling me Shirley. Jo Tanner is political communication strategist, also former advisor to Boris Johnson many years ago.
But at least you gave me something else, because when I'm next to Tanni and it's like 11 times, and I'm like, yeah, I've not done anything. I think I came last in like the mum's race at the last sports day or something. I feel like really rubbish.
Here's a text question from Lisa in Cheshire. If the assisted dying bill crashes out of the House of Lords as is expected, will Tanni be satisfied having successfully and bureaucratically shut down the will of the government? Well, both Natalie and Neil voted in favour of the legislation in the House of Commons, yes. Now, it looks as if this isn't going to get through in time. What does that actually mean?
Well, it's a private member's bill. Although it doesn't quite feel like that in terms of the amount of time that's been given. So to be very techie, the Salisbury Convention doesn't apply in this case. So yes, the Commons have passed it, but it is going slowly at the moment. But Clause 1 took a lot of time in the Commons as well, because that's where there's a huge amount of detail in the bill. But I don't think, we're being accused of filibustering, but actually I don't think you should confuse that with scrutiny, which is our job, to look at the bill line by line and look at the real world implications. So I've got quite a few amendments in there. 30 of my amendments, because the bill is quite vague, are just about saying there needs to be proper reporting of each stage of the process. 2/3 of the bill in the Commons took place with the High Court judge as part of the process. That then got removed. At our end, 70 amendments are just to bring the High Court judge back because of how many different bits of the bill needs amending. So doing it as the number of amendments, there's the media saying it's the biggest number of amendments to any bill ever. I don't think that's quite true. But, our job is to look at it line by line. And I do, I don't like this bill. I don't disagree with the principle. I don't want to see anybody suffer. But we're told it's the safest bill in the world. But what we're not being told is it's safe. And for me, it has to be safe. We've been told that being poor is no reason to not have it. We're being told there won't be any coercion for domestic abuse. We're being told, well, if there's not decent palliative care, well, tough, you should still be able to request it. So I think there's still lots of questions that haven't been answered about how this is going to work in practice.
The government minister has said they, i.e. you and your colleagues, are making a mockery of our parliamentary system and bringing Parliament into disrepute.
I find that quite interesting. They obviously didn't sit through the football governance bill, which was completely painful, and my will to live crawled under the clerk's table and died. But, it's our job is, to look at stuff line by line. And, people love the House of Lords and hate it. So in Brexit, loads of people loved us, and then they hate us, and then they love us again. It's quite interesting. I've had, in the past sort of 18 months or so, actually even longer, MPs actually asking us what the House of Lords does. And, things like pregnancy really didn't get debated in the Commons. I had an amendment on pregnancy, got a lot of grief for that, and was very clear it's not about who can be pregnant, or it's absolutely not about abortion, but it's just what happens. There's about 500 cases a year when a pregnant woman is either diagnosed with cancer or has cancer and gets pregnant, and we need to know what would happen. A really contentious debate last week was about what drugs people would be able to take, and a debate about, well, what happens if they don't work. There's tons of cases around the world where the drugs don't work. So what does the doctor do then? So if the drugs don't work, actually the doctor, like Canada, the doctor can euthanise the person. They do that in Holland and Belgium as well. But the bill doesn't allow that in this country. So then doctors under a moral obligation to save their life, or,
it's
all these things that we work through.
Neil?
Well, I think, given the time, I'm not going to litigate the arguments around it, but let's talk about the principles of the House of Lords. And I think it's absolutely right that the great strength of the House of Lords is that you've got expertise in there and they are the scrutinising chamber. And of course, Tammy's right, this is a private member's bill. There is no convention that says it has to be passed, and there's the will of the Commons that insist upon it. I think the reality will be it is such a consequential piece of legislation, there will be ill feeling if it doesn't get through by some sectors. And I think we have to recognise that. But if the House of Lords feel that they haven't had sufficient time to scrutinise it, then we have to respect what they do and the functionary.
You voted for it.
I voted for it. I will be disappointed if it doesn't become law. But I also recognise the importance of respecting the House of Lords and the role that they take. I don't think those are necessarily contradictory points. I may disagree with some of the arguments that are being made up there, but that's the purpose of debate. What I do think, though, is that were it not to pass, it risks putting back what I think is an important piece of legislation and will provide many, many people with comfort towards the end of their lives, whether they take up that opportunity or not. I think we will park that debate for 10 to 15 years, and I think that would be a great shame.
Natalie?
I voted for. I absolutely agree with the principle, and I think if I saw somebody suffering that I loved, I would want it to be an option for them, and I would want it to be an option for me. But that doesn't mean that when we were in the green room and Tanya was telling me the things she was concerned about, that doesn't mean that they aren't really genuine, legitimate concerns that gave me cause for thought, and I do want to be discussed and debated. I respect so many people.
1,000 amendments. I mean, it's almost unprecedented for there to be that many amendments. And with most pieces of legislation, people would interpret that as just filibustering.
How do we reform the House of Lords to make things more efficient while still Okay, that's been noted. But I don't have that power, I'm afraid. While we're still getting the scrutiny, I think the scrutiny of the second chamber is important. And there are so many people that I really respect. Baroness Berger as well is also doing some of this scrutiny. There are some really good people that have really legitimate concerns. We need a second chamber that does that. Balancing that with an elected House of Commons that has given a very clear indication, I think, is really important. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't have scrutiny.
Joe?
I worked on this some 26, 27 years ago when it came into the Lords. And the principle, I think everyone agrees that it would be good to have a mechanism that you could do this. The reality is that the practicalities are so challenging. And it's not as if
other countries do it.
Yeah, but the problem for me is that if you get it wrong, if you find out that someone was coerced and they're dead, like you can't go back on it. Like it's irreversible, and that is such a big deal. And you have to at some point decide whether, well, if we get it right for the majority of cases, it's okay if some of them weren't. If some of them weren't legit reasons, but they got through somehow. Everyone can break the law or get round the law eventually. There's always clever ways that people come up with. And I think I'm a big fan of the House of Lords. I get really frustrated. I think, Tanya, you make a really good point about, people sort of criticise the House of Lords when it's something they don't like. They think it's obstructive. But actually, it does do an incredible job of scrutiny. And I've got huge respect for Kim Leadbeater and what she's been doing, but I also have a lot of respect for the people that have been working on the other side to ensure that if something is going to become law, it is as robust as it could possibly be, because we just can't afford to get it wrong.
Well, I suspect this is another subject that we will be coming back to on the programme over the coming months. Let's move on in just a few moments. It's 8:46 on LBC.
This is LBC. Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:49, Natalie Fleet, Tanny Gray-Thompson, Neil Shastri-Hurst and Joe Tanner with us taking your questions. Here's John in Broughty Ferry. Hello, John.
Hi, Ian. Pleasure to speak to you again. Here's a where politics meets history question. Abraham Lincoln famously led a cabinet of a team of rivals to some significant success. Has our current Prime Minister's actions this week shown just how weak he really is?
Well, around 50 Labour MPs have signed a letter objecting to the decision to block Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham from standing in a forthcoming parliamentary by-election. I suppose that is essentially what John's referring to. Joe Tanner.
Oh, gosh.
I can go to someone else if you
No,
want.
I mean, I just, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's kind of how do you answer that sort of what would he have done? What could he have done? What options did the Prime Minister have? And what does he do next? I mean, I think sometimes I was looking at the week actually last week when you look at how Sunday evolved with the sort of news from Trump and how he was going to go after us over the Greenland stuff. We then had the whole trip to Davos, then we had the comments about UK servicemen. Then by the end of the week, we had the Burnham stuff. And you sort of think I remember the sort of memes of like the goalie that just kept getting hit by the ball in the face. And it's like, where do you go? Everything you do is either, something on the world stage or a self-inflicted wound. And it's just this, I think he does look weak. I don't know what the other option would have been than to probably be involved in sort of blocking Burnham from standing. But I just think more generally, it's just playing into this narrative of what exactly is he and what's he going to do? Because now we've got, tonight we've got a story about Angela Rayner's supporters saying that, she's not dead yet and she's gearing up. She's got 80 supporters. And it sounds like back to the Tory days of, we're plotting and Graham Brady's going to get a load of letters under the door again. I feel like I'm stuck in a sort of doom loop of, it's just a sort of, we don't like them, we're going to move them on again. And that's what it feels like. There is no stability whatsoever. So, yeah, I do think he's in a very difficult position.
Natalie, have you signed this letter?
Oh, absolutely not. I have thought a lot about it, though. When you're doing selections, you've stood for selection before? Yeah, when I stood for selection, the drama, I was accused of cheating, there were fixers here and things there were aggrieved people. Can I just make clear that I wasn't? Okay. It was, and then as soon as you're elected, or as soon as
you succeeded, and I didn't. So maybe there's a lesson
things
there.
that, like, my family can remember what allegations were made about me. There were allegations made about who parented my children. This is how awful. It was awful. There were letters written to the NEC that said the only reason she's got all this access that she shouldn't have, and it's because she's been sleeping with a man she shouldn't have been. It wasn't just dodgy and infighting. It was seeped in misogyny. The minute I'm the candidate, everybody's forgot. And I think that's where we are with this psychodrama. I get that more people care about Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham than they did about me and the Bolsover selection. But the minute you are in government and start delivering, people just completely forget. I don't think it's like the Tory days because Keir Starmer is still the Prime Minister, and the way that he is, we have that stability, and the way that he's leading on the world stage. I went to Denmark last week and we went to the Parliament, and all they kept saying to us is, your support is so valued. We are so grateful. The leadership he has been showing on an international level. Yes, there's a Twitter drama that I love scrolling through, that I love scrolling through like everybody else. Keir Starmer is still the Prime Minister. I believe he will be by the next election. He says he's got a 5-year mandate with a massive landslide and he's focused on delivery. I support him in all of that.
Do you love scrolling through it though, or do you feel like throwing your phone at the wall and go, I just want to get on with talking about the price of milk tomorrow or what we're going to do on energy? Do you not actually think, oh my goodness, can't they all just get their act together? Because I just think it must be a massive distraction.
It is as well. You're right, and we also know that these platforms aren't very healthy. I mean, the stuff that X has gone through with like all the I haven't had my clothes taken off against my will. Lots of female colleagues have. This is not okay. I feel like morally I shouldn't even be on there, but I'm addicted to this 24-hour news cycle, and it's 5 o'clock. Is Andy Burnham going to announce or is he not? So I'm also part of the problem. But what I feel very strongly is nobody in my community cares. They're not hearing about it. We care about it in the bubble. I get that. It doesn't cut through in the same way.
Well, you'll be very delighted to know that scrolling through Instagram on the train this morning, you came up on my Instagram reels.
I love this. I can do any... I can do an autograph.
You're a celebrity.
You can have a selfie.
OK.
Yeah.
We'll do that in a moment. Neil?
I think the Prime Minister's there was no good choice for him, and whatever he did, he was going to find himself facing a pretty difficult reception. I think he probably made the worst of the choices, because it does look like he's blocking a potential rival, and I think that always goes down badly. It's much better to have tall poppies around you and bring them into the tent and use their skills. You could have easily, if Burnham had won the by-election, you could have brought him in and said, right, you've always wanted to deliver Northern Rail and the Northern Agenda. I'll give you a ministerial portfolio to do that. I think he just looks fickle, and he looks as though he is uncertain in his own position.
Right. Tanny?
Do you know, I love being a crossbencher and not having a political home.
Are you going to plead the fifth on this one?
No, I feel like I'm doom scrolling an episode of Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister, which could almost be up for it, and it's a bit like get my popcorn moment. I don't think they can do right for doing wrong. So, and it does for, when somebody says, oh, I don't want to be Prime Minister, it means they really do. And when Prime Minister says they have complete faith in their minister, it means they're not going to last very long. It feels like one of those moments.
Shall we test that out? Do you want to be Prime Minister, Natalie?
Yeah, I'd love to be. Yeah, great.
Excellent.
But I think you're right. It's, does it matter in lots of bits of the UK? I mean, I quite like Andy Burnham as a mayor in terms of what he's done accessibility on public transport. But I don't think it's great for the Labour Party, because I do think it makes the Prime Minister look like he's worried. But actually, if Burnham had come in, I'm sure Burnham probably would like to be Prime Minister. And, it doesn't fix any of the problems. Either he stands or not stands, there is still a problem there. Right,
I do need very, very short answers on this next question. Would you trust your child with an AI tutor? Now, the government has announced up to 450,000 children from disadvantaged backgrounds could benefit from what they call safe AI-powered tutoring tools, providing personalised one-to-one learning support, levelling the playing field for those who cannot afford private tutors. Neil?
I've got a 4-year-old, and I wouldn't trust him with AI at the moment. But more importantly, I'd like him to have that interaction with a physical interaction with a teacher. I think that's how you develop your social skills as much as your academic skills. And I think that's crucially important, and you'd lose it by that.
Natalie?
Embracing technology is really important. It can be beneficial as long as it's safe. It's never a substitute for human interaction.
Joe?
I would worry that what you don't do with AI potentially is understand why a child is getting something wrong. So I don't understand how AI would coach you, which is actually part of what teaching is about.
Tony?
AI is fascinating. I'm intrigued by it. I use it, but I'm also worried about some of the sexualised chats that we've seen happening. But if young people don't learn to use it, they're going to be left behind. It's how we can make it safe, and I'm not sure we can at the moment.
Right, our fun question is from Philip in Hounslow. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another leads this year's BAFTA nominations. What was the panellists' favourite film last year? I will accept films that were watched last year, if not released last year. Tanny?
So I'm not sure I should admit this. So it wasn't released last year, but I watched Fast and Furious. I've not watched any of the series, but Hobbs and Shaw, I absolutely adore it. It's complete nonsense and stupid, but I watch it again and again.
Joe?
I am a total romantic, and I watched a film called All of You with the comedian Brett Goldstein, who plays Roy Keane in the series Ted Lasso. And it's all about a couple of best friends that are intrigued about whether you can do a test to find your soulmate. And it's about what it does to their relationship, because one of them it turns out, I won't give the spoiler away, but one of them takes the test, and it's kind of the journey they go on and the obsession that the test must have been right. And it's fascinating about how you fall in love.
Recently found your soulmate.
And I got married for the second time last year and definitely found the person I should have found first time around. But he's a wonderful man, so yes, I'm very happy.
Natalie.
My favourite feminist film of all time, I think it's the best feminist film there is, Barbie. Absolutely love it. I watched it with my daughter recently, she's 12, and my 17-year-old lad was there as well. And I'm like, yeah, you are Kenough. And my husband has a I am Kenough t-shirt. It's brilliant. I feel that look on your face tells me you haven't watched it.
I haven't watched it, and I will never watch it.
So, lovely Gloria De Piero, a great friend of mine, she did ruin it for me because she told me that she thought that Richard Tice looked a bit like Ken. That worried me.
He'd love that.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to make a comment about Isabel Oakeshott, but I'm going to resist it. Neil?
Not a new film, but I took my son to the cinema for the first time last year, and we watched The Lion King that had come back out. And just seeing him light up watching a big screen is something I'll hold with me from last year.
Well, thank you all very much indeed for coming on the panel tonight. Really, really interesting programme, I think we'll all agree. Now, on the programme tomorrow night, we have... no, it's not telling me who's on the programme tomorrow night, or is it? No, so I can't tell you. So anyway, let me tell you what's on the programme in the next hour. It is, of course, International Holocaust Memorial Day today. So we thought we would commemorate that by spending an hour talking about what it means, why it's important to remember. Possibly, as Joe Tanner said earlier in the programme, possibly more important this year than any other. Dov Foreman is going to join us. Now, if you're a regular listener to the programme, you may have heard him on the programme before. His grandmother was an Auschwitz survivor. She sadly died fairly recently, but she wrote a brilliant memoir. He will be here to tell us all about International Holocaust Memorial Day and why it matters, and he'll be taking your calls as well. 0345 6060 973 is, of course, the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock. In the last hour, the Palace of Westminster and Cardiff and Edinburgh castles have been lit up in purple for a national moment in remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust. That's the sound of a ceremony in Westminster attended by survivors on Holocaust Memorial Day. It's exactly 81 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. John Dobai from Budapest survived the genocide. He lives near the Thames in London.
There are benches there which were daubed with paint, questioning the truth that the Holocaust even happened. And I went home immediately, got a scrubbing brush and started to scrub the benches, because we can't let this pass.
The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has told LBC that the government wants to stand by pubs after announcing tax relief on new business rates.
We want to back our pubs. They are huge assets in our local communities, and this government wants to stand by them.
From April, bills for pubs and music venues in England will be cut by 15%. The Conservatives and landlords warn it doesn't go far enough. Owner of pubs and restaurants, Andy Lennox, has led a campaign to bar Labour MPs from hospitality venues.
Actually, they have listened a bit. The problem is they've brought down taxes to before the budget, so they haven't actually cut anything. They've just taken out the rise that they were going to put in.
Drivers are being told to take extra care in Northern Ireland after what authorities there call exceptional rainfall from Storm Chandra. Nearly 300 obstructions and fallen trees or branches on the roads have been reported there. And more than 100 flood warnings are in place across Great Britain. Our South West correspondent Andy Ballantyne has been in East Devon.
Some 60 to 80 millimetres of rain fell, turning fields into lakes and roads into rivers. Residents tell me it's the worst flooding they've experienced in some 40 or 50 years.
And one battle after another leads this year's BAFTA film nominations. The action thriller's up for 14 awards. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 58 points at 10,207. The pound buys $1.37 and €1.15. LBC weather, rain and hill snow clearing to the north, turning drier, winds in the north gradually easing, lows of -3 to 4 Celsius. Patchy fog in the east at first tomorrow, showers possible in the southwest and northeast, otherwise bright and breezy, highs of 3 to 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 4 minutes past 9. Don't forget, we are streaming the whole programme live on the LBC YouTube channel, on Global Player and the LBC app if you'd like to watch us. Now, this hour, we're going to mark International Holocaust Memorial Day with my guest, Dov Foreman, who is with me here in the studio. And you may have heard him on the channel before. We spent a couple of hours once talking about his grandmother and her book, which did you co-write it?
Co-authored it with her.
And then another time just talking about anti-Semitism in general and why it has been on the rise in the UK. So lots to talk about in this hour. Dov's very happy to take your calls. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Let's start off with hopefully a very simple question. What does this day mean to you?
Well, Holocaust Memorial Day is the annual day every year on the 27th of January, which marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest killing centre during the Holocaust. So the first thing that Holocaust Memorial Day means for me is a day to commemorate my great-grandmother's mother, her younger sister and her youngest brother, and over 100 members of her extended family who were murdered there in the hell of Auschwitz-Birkenau. 100 members. And
that's just so difficult to even imagine, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's not even to mention her whole town, almost her entire town, and the other 450,000 Hungarian Jews who within the space of 6 weeks were murdered in the hell of Auschwitz. And that's just Auschwitz. Another thing that Holocaust Memorial Day means for me is a day to reflect on where society is when it comes to anti-Semitism. And I think this year, in 2026, we've spoken about anti-Semitism a lot. We did a full hour on it, taking calls. But I think this year, Holocaust Memorial Day feels different because anti-Semitism has risen to a level that we haven't seen before in the UK, that we haven't seen before since the times of the Holocaust. And so I think this year, Holocaust Memorial Day needs to be a time when we reflect and we say, how did we get here? But what are we going to do to change it? And that has to mean listening to the stories of survivors like my great-grandmother, those who are still alive. We had a Holocaust survivor who was a personal hero of mine who passed away only 12 days ago, Harry Ulmer. He survived 6 Nazi concentration and slave labour camps, and I went to Poland with him in 2023. So I think a day like today is one where we need to learn their lessons, and we need to learn the lessons that we can put into our society today, because what these testimonies teach us, aside from the incredible stories of hope and how you can rebuild from the darkness, is also where hate, if left unchecked and if left unchallenged, can lead to. And I think today we've seen anti-Semitism become de facto decriminalised in the UK, and also completely normalised, whether that's in the NHS. You have doctors tweeting things like gas the Jews and they just get a slap on the wrist and are able to continue practicing, or whether it's in the arts, for example, where you get Jewish comedians, artists, singers, musicians who aren't allowed to play in certain venues. The Edinburgh Fringe cancelled all of their Jewish artists this year for no apparent reason other than safety concerns, which were not explained, and they didn't bother to put on extra security for them. So I think in all sectors of society, you're seeing anti-Semitism being normalised and Jews being pushed to the margins, and that's what leads to things like what happened in Manchester and what happened in Bondi Beach happening. It's when you hear that language of the othering of the Jew and when you see them being pushed to the margins of society. So Holocaust Memorial Day is a day for me, and I think for society, to reflect on where we are and to put into action what we learned from the survivors.
And do you think it's worse this year than it was this time last year?
I think it is. And I hoped that with the ceasefire in the Middle East, however fragile that ceasefire might be, that extremism, that anti-Semitism, that anti-Jewish hatred might die down. But unfortunately, we've seen the complete opposite, whether that's on university campuses. I'm a student on my campus. I've seen that actually it's got worse, and they continue to act as a mob and to hunt the Jews and to scream at the Jews as they go to their lectures and to make life uncomfortable to be a Jew on campus. Again, that's not to say that every Jew has experienced anti-Semitism on campus, or whether it's just on the streets. And anti-Semitism, you can see this by the statistics, has almost, I think, stayed the same. So,
and do you think that for a lot of the people at universities, it is largely related to the current situation in Israel and Gaza?
Well, I think when you've had so many lies pumped at you for the past 3 years about the Jewish state and also the Jews, you would become prone to arguments which would make you anti-Semitic and would make you possibly hate Jews. That's not to say, firstly, all wars are terrible, every civilian death is a tragedy, and no one wants to see war and everyone wants to see peace, I think, everyone that I know at least. And so that's just a starter. But certainly, I think on university campus, more than anywhere else, you see this, that the protests have continued well after the ceasefire, and people, despite being able to, I could present someone with the truth, they just won't even listen. They won't even want to hear the conversation. They're just so kind of set in stone in their beliefs and what they're seeing on the news. And I have to say that those allies that stand with the Jewish community, despite seeing so many things about us over the past 3 years, I can't actually believe it when I speak to those people, because I think that the stuff that we see on social media that we're pumped through the national broadcasters and other people, I can't blame people when they see all of this and suddenly they learn to demonise and to hate the Jew.
And what about personal safety? Because, I mean, if people are watching this programme now rather than just listening to us, they can see that you've got, what is this called again?
Kippah, or yarmulke.
Would you wear that on London Underground?
I wear it every day. My great-grandmother survived the Holocaust, not so that her great-grandson will feel unsafe on the streets of London.
But a lot of Jews are making sure that they don't look, I mean, quite horrible phrase, visibly Jewish. I don't even know what other phrase to use.
100%. Many of my friends take off their kippah or put on a cap. Many people who are visiting, whether that's friends of mine from America or even from Israel, where there's a war or there was a war going on, feel less safe in London than they do in their home countries. And I think that's a shocking statement to say that there are Jews who don't feel safe in London. And there are times and places in this country and in this city, this great multicultural city, where I don't feel safe. And I think that's wrong. Because why should I, as a Jew, have to go about my life any differently to anyone else?
I know quite a few people who are Jewish who, over the past few years, have thought about leaving this country. I saw a survey recently that I was astonished. I can't remember what the percentage was, but it was quite high, of Jewish people who just said, well, we no longer feel safe, so therefore we're thinking of moving to Israel. And of course, the natural reaction to that is thinking, are you serious? You think you would be safer in Israel than here? Now, you've got obviously mixed in Jewish circles far more than I do. What's your experience?
Well, I think the statistic was over 50%, but in my experience, I don't know any Jew who hasn't questioned their future in this country over the last 2.5 years. I have. That's not to say that I think Jews are going to be mowed down on the streets every single day and there's going to be a mass terror attack every single day, though we have seen that in Manchester, and we saw recently a terror attack foiled where they had hundreds of rounds of munitions and were trying to buy 4 assault rifles to murder Jews and had scoped out synagogues, etc.
So and there are probably many others that we don't know about.
But I think many Jewish people are questioning themselves, is this the country that I want to raise my children in, or that I want my grandchildren and great-grandchildren to grow up in? Will it be safe for them? It's not even them questioning about themselves. It's about where do they want to move to so that their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, considering all that's changing in this country and all the anti-Semitism that's growing, and the fact that young people on schools and university campuses completely believe in this, I think they are considering their future here, and I myself have too.
About 6-8 months ago, I went to speak at a synagogue in Hertford. I won't name it. The fact that I won't even name it tells you all you need to know, really, doesn't it? In Hertfordshire. And I was quite shocked to see 2 security guards on the door. And they told me that one of them would be there overnight, because now there will be many people who say, yeah, that happens at mosques too, which doesn't make equivalence, does not make something right. And I think any religious institution that feels the need to have security guards, we have to question our society in that regard. Is that happening in every synagogue in the country now?
I believe that every single synagogue in the country has security outside, and every single school. They resemble fortresses with barbed wire in some instances and high fences and thick doors. And I think the response to the growing anti-Semitism can't just be to kind of try and put out the ever-growing flames. It has to go to the source of it. And so often we hear, and we're very thankful to it, that the government is kind of imposing more money to invest in security, and that's great. And again, we're very, very thankful for that as a community. But it's shocking that we even have to have that in the first place, and we need to go and try and root out the kind of the root issue, not just fight the flames. And ultimately, we can't just keep building ever thicker doors and fences and higher fences. It doesn't work. because eventually something will happen, like we saw in Manchester. Eventually they will be able to get through. And every single Saturday we have Jewish volunteers standing outside synagogues and with stab-proof vests and outside schools every year. I mean, I don't remember ever a time when I joined the new school year in my Jewish school, because I went through Jewish schooling. I don't ever remember a time that when you're introduced to your new classroom and your new teacher, you're not also introduced to the new code word for that year. For if there's a terrorist, you all hide under your desks, you close the curtains, you lock the doors, and you wait to hear that code word to know that it's safe to come out. And you would practice that numerous times throughout the year. I don't know any other faith school in the country that has to do that other than Jewish ones.
Do you think social media is in part to blame for this? Because I always use the example of, and this is more not particularly related to Jewish issues, but sort of if you live in a remote rural community, you live in a small village, and you are an overt racist, you probably think you're the only one in the village. And then Facebook comes along, and Facebook groups come along, and you suddenly find, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. And so you can form a little group which empowers you, and it validates, in your eyes, your own extremist opinions. And I think this is at the fundamental root of the problem in this country, that social media has promulgated all the different propagandas about racism, about Islamophobia, about anti-Semitism, that it's become seen as a normal thing on social media. And I have no idea, I have no clue what you do about that, but that has to be at the root of it.
100%. I think so many of these problems are coming from social media, as you say, and so many people are being radicalized, especially young people. I get comments from people as young as 5 years old, and I can see just from their profiles, or 5, 10, 15, very young people commenting the most abhorrent things towards me and my great-grandmother while she was still alive, but even now, well after she passed away, people saying that they hope that she would be raped, that Hitler missed one, that the Holocaust is a hoax, all sorts of people questioning the numbers. I mean, these are terrible things, and it's people just scrolling on their feeds every single day and seeing this hatred and then absorbing it and then repeating it. And I think the social media companies could do more. They just don't want to, because they care more about the money in their pockets, and so they don't.
Right, we'll talk more in a little bit and take calls. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to talk to Dov Foreman, ask him a question. Just give your views as well on why you think anti-Semitism is so rife in this country. I say this whenever we talk about these issues, that, I don't know, before 2015 or so, I don't remember doing a single phone-in on anti-Semitism over 5 years on LBC. It changed in 2015 because anti-Semitism seemed to be tolerated by a major political party in this country. Its leader seemed to tolerate it. Now, that was as nothing compared to what we have today. And yes, you can put it all at the root of the Israel-Gaza conflict. But, I mean, we do have to differentiate between being Jewish and supporting a government in the state of Israel. I don't particularly want to spend the rest of this hour necessarily talking about the differentiation, because we can't get away from the fact that the whole Israel-Gaza issue plays a role in this in some way. But maybe Dov will tell us his views on that in a moment too. 0345 6060 973. It's 17 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
Octopus
Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
19 minutes past 9. Dol Foreman is here. We're talking about International Holocaust Memorial Day. You had an interesting experience on the BBC this morning. You were on the Today programme, their flagship breakfast show, and I saw some tweets about it, which were saying that they treated you appallingly. Now, I listened back to the passage, and I thought the criticism of them, I thought was a little overblown. Just give us your view on what happened.
Well, I was on the Today programme to talk about Holocaust Memorial Day, like I'm here now, and Nick is a great friend of my great-grandmother's, Nick Robinson, and he is a great friend of the Jewish community and has always been interested and involved in Holocaust education. He chairs every year the Holocaust Education Trust dinner, and so I do have great respect for him. He decided to speak about the fact that 60% of schools, compared to 2023, no longer commemorate the Holocaust on this day, and then brought in Gaza and asked my thoughts on that. I then answered, and then there was whole Twitter spat about whether that was right of him to ask or not. I don't think he was asking in a malicious way, though I do think that the premise of the question is wrong, and that's not a criticism of him or the programme, but I do think that the Holocaust needs no justification, has nothing to do with current events in the world, and people, frankly, who do think that it needs justification or needs comparing to any other sort of war or any horror in the world, or even, by the way, any act of hatred, I think they're wrong, because the Holocaust is unique, and it's unique in many ways for the scale, the systematic nature of it, and also the fact that it's part of a much wider story. I also think that's a failure of Holocaust education, that so often we teach the Holocaust between the periods just of 1933 and 1945, and we say that it's just the whim of one hungry for power dictator, anti-Semitic dictator Hitler. That's not true. The Holocaust starts way before, and actually this is a much wider story, and the anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust didn't end in 1945 with the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. It continues today, and it simply mutates. It's a virus, which throughout history has mutated, and that led to things like the blood libel, the Crusades, and the murder of Jews and the Inquisitions, and eventually to the Holocaust, and today to modern-day anti-Semitic terror attacks like in Manchester and like in Bondi. And to answer your previous question also, just to go back about how you said that you think that anti-Semitism is spiking to do with Israel and Gaza, it definitely has spiked because of that, but I think actually it spiked well before there was any Israeli invasion into Gaza after
I think that is true. And this is where I think a lot of people in my position, whether it's on our station or anywhere else, I think are sometimes quite nervous about even discussing this, because one word out of place or one slightly clumsily phrased question leads to an absolute pile-on, because either you've been defending the indefensible or attacking the wrong target. And so in some ways, I mean, I'm not surprised that so many schools aren't doing this nowadays, because a lot of their teachers will be worried about what they should or should not say.
But the Holocaust is not a controversial topic. I mean, if you actually get to the crux of it, why are teachers worried about what they might say? It's because there's obviously anti-Semitic parents in their communities. Many of these schools cite community tensions as the reason they're no longer teaching. What are these community tensions? Is it that most of these schools are in pockets of certain large communities where they're worried about what the parents might say to them if they teach their kids about how 6 million innocent Jewish men, women and children were murdered? If it is, then that's anti-Semitic. There is a separate question, of course, about people who are well-meaning and who try and say things, and as with Nick Robinson this morning, I actually, again, I don't think he was doing that in a malicious way, but some people did. But maybe speak out in the wrong way or don't ask that question in the most profound way. And look, people aren't perfect. People make mistakes. And I think the reason that the Jewish community so often is on the edge is because of how much anti-Semitism throughout the ages we've faced. We are an anxious community, and I think that makes sense if you look at what's happened to us.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but one of the Today news bulletins the presenter said that 6 million people were killed by the Nazis rather than 6 million Jews or 13 million people. Now, some people will say, well, that's just a sort of, I mean, there's nothing meant by that. But sometimes, so there is something meant by that.
Yes, exactly. Well, again, it goes back to the point. Maybe if it happened once, you might excuse it as a mistake. Twice, again, you might say, perhaps the presenter made a mistake, but the fact that this keeps happening, not just on the BBC, but that so many councils, so many MPs, so many individuals refuse to mention the word Jews when it comes to the Holocaust, again, that's wrong and that's anti-Semitic. And it's effectively saying we want to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day, but so as not to offend anyone, we won't invite the Jew to the commemoration, or we won't mention the Jews. The Holocaust was the systematic state-sponsored murder of 6 million innocent Jewish men, women and children for no reason other than the fact that they were born Jewish.
How is it, therefore, that this myth has grown up that the Holocaust either didn't happen or that it's been grossly exaggerated? I mean, I have no explanation for this. I don't understand how people can believe that when there is footage available, which clearly is genuine footage, of the concentration camps. The sites still exist. I mean, you will have been to some of them. I've been to 3 of them. They're not made up. I mean, the foundations of the huts are there. Exactly. The ovens are still in existence in some of them. And yet still people, particularly in the United States of America, but some people in this country, do not believe it happened.
And the most frightening thing, by the way, is that this sort of anti-Semitism, but also this denial, comes from all political spectrums, from the far right, from the far left, from even those in the centre, from people of all religions. Anti-Semitism is a social pathological virus. It's impossible to explain. Why do people hate Jews in the first place? Why do they deny the Holocaust? These are things which we can't explain. But I think, actually, when you speak to most deniers, and I've had debates with them, and I've spoken to them, and I've tried to reason with them, actually, I think deep down, many of these people do know that the Holocaust happened. But they hate Jews so much that they use that for their advantage, and they manipulate vulnerable children who their brains and their minds are still developing, and they kind of seep this poison into their minds, again, back to our conversation about social media, through social media, and they are able to get people, again, as young as like 10 and 15 on my social media page to say, well, 6 million Jews didn't die, the Holocaust did happen, but only 207,000 Jews died. And they say, do you know why? Because if you have an oven and you want to bake cookies, you can't bake 6 million cookies in 5 years. But if you only have 5 ovens and you can put X amount of cookies in the oven each time. I mean, they simply don't understand how the Holocaust worked. 1.5 million people murdered by bullets. Of course, 1.1 million people murdered by gas in Auschwitz. Then there's also the gas through the vans. There's starvation. There's people freezing. There's people dying of being overworked. There's people being killed on the death marches. So these are people who just don't understand history. And the reason they don't understand history is because they've been manipulated by those anti-Semites.
Right, let's take a couple of calls before we go to the news. Ben is in Finchley. Hello, Ben.
Hi there, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
What would you like to say?
Yeah, and hi, Dov. Just wanted to say, amazing to hear you, and thanks for everything you do. I wanted to just ask a question and raise a point about what you asked Dov before about social media. My view is clearly social media plays a big part in rising anti-Semitism that we've seen today and conspiracy theories, but I think it's just a symptom of wider societal issues. And it's not just social media. You have the mainstream media, in particular the BBC and other mainstream channels, that are pumping out constant propaganda and lies about Israel and therefore Jews, because people view Israel as a proxy for a Jew. And what they're doing in Gaza, what they're doing to the poor Palestinian population. And a lot of this is not true. A lot of it is kind of trying to whip up the people into a hatred and into an othering of Jewish people. And I think that contributes as much or significantly to anti-Semitism as social media does. So I'd like to ask your views on that. And also, in light of what's happening in Iran at the moment, where the Islamic Republic are murdering tens of thousands of their own Muslim or non-Muslim citizens, and the world is just turning a blind eye. There's no daily reports in the media and BBC about this. It's just an example of how when there's a situation involving Israel or Jewish people, it is magnified, and that drives anti-Semitism. I'd like to know your views and Dov's views as well. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Ben. Very good question. Just to take Iran first, I completely agree. Firstly, Iran is a state-head sponsor of global terror around the world, and we would do good to focus more on that. And I mean, the reports are conflicting, but between at least 5 and 10 and 30,000 people have been murdered. And suddenly these social justice humanitarian warriors, people like Greta Thunberg, but also all those hundreds of thousands of people we saw on the streets, are completely silent. Now, who knows why? Perhaps that's because the people funding them.
It is becoming a bit of a thing on Instagram Reels, sort of, where's Greta? Exactly. I see lots of reels with that subject.
So look, I think we would do good to focus more on that, and also to help topple the tyrannical, theocratical Iranian regime, because I think that would help the world in destroying terror. Back to your question about social media propaganda, mainstream media, I completely agree. I mean, the Nazis existed without social media, and they did that through propaganda, through taking control of the state newspapers and state broadcasters and radio. And that's not to say that there are Nazis in the UK have taken control of the mainstream media, but there are people who have tried every single day to push out a message, a certain narrative about the Jews and about our only nation state. And that does affect anti-Semitism, that does affect anti-Jewish racism, and that does affect the way that the Jew is seen in this country.
Well, I think Leni Riefenstahl, who was Hitler's filmmaker, if she was alive today, she would be loving some of these social media clips that these wicked people put out. Does social media have a uniquely modern influence in the rise of anti-Semitism? I'm thinking specifically of the way in which clips of Andrew Tate and other influence, sort of singing Heil Hitler, spread so virally on Twitter, or on the occasion when Grok AI claimed to be Mecha Hitler.
I mean, crazy. I think it does. It does. I saw the video of the gropers, as they're called in America, singing Heil Hitler, amongst other things. And I mean, absurd that they're able to get away with this and that Elon Musk doesn't put a stop to that. And also the other social media barons. Again, it goes back to the fact that these people care about more, they care more about the money in their pockets than actually protecting Jewish people. And I think we'll wait to see something serious happen to Jewish people off the back of social media until something happens. I mean, we already have seen such things happen, but until there is some more action taken. And so, look, I think it goes back to the point that anti-Semites existed well before social media, and they'll always find a way to cut through, whether that was Goebbels, one of the most, at the time, forward-thinking propagandists in the world, coming up with new posters and caricatures of Jews, or whether it's people now using AI to manipulate the faces and of Jews, or just to create songs and other anti-Semitic messaging. And this will always cut through, because anti-Semites somehow have the power to manipulate the hearts and minds of people across the world and to make them hate the Jews.
Well, we've got lots of calls coming in. We'll come to all of them in the next half an hour here on LBC. We're marking International Holocaust Memorial Day, talking about the rise of anti-Semitism, what lies behind it, what can be done about it. It's 9:31 News Headlines with Matt Hewitt.
Pubs and music venues in England have been handed a support package after a backlash over the budget. The Treasury's confirmed a 15% cut to their business rates bills from April, but there's criticism other businesses have been left out. Donald Trump said he'll do whatever's appropriate after being asked if he'll pull federal immigration agents out of Minneapolis. The US leaders also defended removing a controversial border commander from the city, where agents have killed 2 people this month, as a shake-up of his team. And the Kings met Holocaust survivors and their families at a Buckingham Palace reception on the 81st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. 95-year-old Mala Tribich told government ministers how Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939 destroyed her childhood. LBC weather, rain and hill snow clearing to the north, turning drier. Winds in the north gradually easing, lows of -3 to 4 Celsius. Patchy fog in the east at first tomorrow. Showers possible in the southwest and northeast, otherwise bright and breezy with highs of 10.
This is LBC. Dale on LBC.
9:34. Dov Foreman is here taking your calls on International Holocaust Memorial Day. Let's go to Leah in Barnet. Hello, Leah.
Hi, good evening, Dov and Iain, and thank you for taking my call and to both of you for raising awareness on this matter. So by way of background, I'm Jewish, but I didn't go to a Jewish school, and I actually visited Poland, I think it was around 2 years ago now, with a group of people from my synagogue, and we went to Auschwitz and several other camps, and found this to be obviously a very important and sad experience. I just wondered whether, particularly in light of today's news about a high number of schools in the UK I think they weren't participating in Holocaust Memorial Day. I just wondered whether you would feel it would be beneficial for secondary schools in the UK to make it mandatory to visit Poland, and in particularly Auschwitz, or if not mandatory, to at least make it an option for secondary schools to visit. I know that Jewish schools do take students in year 12 or 13 to visit Poland.
Well, can I jump in there first? Because I went to Auschwitz about 7 or 8 years ago with the Holocaust Educational Trust, and they were taking several hundred secondary school pupils, not Jewish, just from general secondary schools to Auschwitz as well. So that does happen.
It does, and I think the Holocaust Educational Trust, through their Lessons from Auschwitz project, do incredibly important work. The statistic is that there was a 60% reduction in schools commemorating Holocaust Memorial Day, according to the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, between October or before January 2023 and then to now. That's a shocking statistic, and again, it goes back to all we were saying before about how the Holocaust is now seen as controversial and it shouldn't need any justification, or people saying that it's about community tensions. I mean, to me, it sounds like anti-Semitism. I think going to visit Auschwitz, to make that mandatory, incredibly difficult, and I don't think, I mean, people should make the decision if they want to go or not. For some, it'll be too difficult. My own grandmother, Lily's daughter, found it too difficult to go, as an example, and that's completely fair enough. But I think it's highly important. My great-grandmother, who survived and saw those things, witnessed the most terrible horrors in Auschwitz, she could not even begin to describe what she saw there. So how can I, the great-grandson of a survivor, begin to do that even justice when she could only just kind of touch the edge of what she saw? And so I think you do need to go there to see the sheer scale of it and the sheer barbarity of what happened there, the kind of process of dehumanization. The numbering, my great-grandmother's number was A10572, a permanent reminder of the Nazis' crimes against humanity, and we grew up seeing that number on her arm. And again, just to see the sheer scale when you walk into Birkenau and you see this purpose-built ramp, which was built right into the camp for the Hungarian Jews, so that when 500,000 of them arrived, they could be gassed and cremated as efficiently as possible. I think when you see that, you begin to understand. And when you walk through Block 5 in Auschwitz and you see the shoes and the glasses and the hair, I think that's when you can begin to understand. Because when you look at those shoes, you think, and you see, for example, a child's shoes, you might think to yourself, that could have been my son or my daughter. That could have been me. And when you see the glasses, if you're someone like me wearing glasses, you might think, I mean, how terrible is that? Or, I mean, the Jewish artifacts which were taken away, what we call a tallit, the prayer shawl, or, for example, the prosthetic limbs, because they also murdered all of the disabled people there and then sent those limbs to the injured Nazis on the front line. So I think to go there is incredibly important. To make it mandatory, very difficult, but I think I would certainly recommend to anyone who hasn't been to go. It's a transformative experience. I agree with that. I would say, however, that I've been to 3 of the concentration camps. Buchenwald and Dachau were the other 2 that I went to. And as psychological experiences, I would say that those 2 had more effect on me than Auschwitz did, because I felt that, I'm not going to say it was, well, I don't know how else to describe it, but to me, it felt a little bit touristy. And it didn't have the... In Buchenwald, I went in 1990, just after the Berlin Wall came down. And I don't know what it's like now, but at that point, you just had like the foundations, and there was one big building where they had the hair, where they had the shoes and all of that. And I remember walking around that in tears. That didn't happen to me in Auschwitz. I'm quite an emotional person, and it just didn't... It didn't connect with me in the same way. So, I mean, if you get the opportunity to go to any of the others, I think it is really worth doing as well. Well, look, a lot of people say that to me. It's interesting. Obviously, for me, my great-grandmother was in Auschwitz-Birkenau, so for me that was very special. But I've heard that from a lot of people, and so I do think, as you say, it's important to go. But I also think if you have the opportunity to go to Poland to see these sites, it's also incredibly important to learn about the Jewish history that existed there before the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust is not just the story of those who were murdered, it's also the story of what was lost, the Jewish life that was lost there, the most vibrant Jewish towns that we've seen for centuries as Jews, more vibrant than any Jewish kind of community in London is. And so I think that part of the story is also very important. And actually, when you look at the Nazi lists, for example, which were drawn up in Wannsee, in the Wannsee conference, where many say the final solution was coined, though of course that's a historical debate, you'll see that there were some places where the Nazis had listed 200, 100 Jews, because they were going to hunt every last remanency, not just of the Jewish human beings, but also of Jewishness. They wanted to destroy the Torahs, destroy the synagogues, destroy the Jewish books. And that is what they almost succeeded in doing. They wiped out 2/3 of European Jewry, but also much of the Jewish establishment that existed in Europe.
I find it fascinating about Jews who now live in Germany and have actually moved to Germany. The sort of the logic of doing that, and the almost the courage that it must take to do that, given what happened. And it is only, I mean, we're marking the 81st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, which in time is a very short time. And I mean, I don't know what the Jewish population in Germany is compared to here. I assume lower, but I think it is actually growing.
Just on population, by the way, I think an interesting stat, especially, I mean, I don't know if you saw this clip of Joe Rogan, where he was asked how many Jews do you think, Joe Rogan, one of the biggest podcasters in the world, he was asked how many Jews do you think there are in the world? He says 1 billion. Well, actually, the number of Jews has not yet recovered to pre-Holocaust levels and is only about 15 million. I think if you ask most people how many Jews are there in the world, they would get that number wrong. And I think that's something which is worth bearing, how small of a community we are. My great-grandmother, just back to the German point, she never hated the Germans. She actually, I never heard her say she hated anyone. She went through what hate can lead to. And so I think she understood that whilst, of course, the Nazis did something terrible and she would never forgive them for that, she never hated a German person. And so I could probably understand why there are some Jews who move back. I personally probably wouldn't move to Germany. But, I mean, I don't see why there's any problem with that.
OK, Leah, thank you very much. Let's go to Rebecca, who is in... Where are you, Rebecca? You're in Wandsworth. Hi.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much for taking my call. Now, I'm absolutely bewildered about anti-Semitism that's been going on in this country for 2 years and all over the world. Now, I've been very bewildered about the amount of people who are anti-Semitic. Now, I think that you can manipulate people, human beings, very easily for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in this case, obviously, it's bad and ugly. I mean, this is what happened in Nazi Germany in the 30s when Hitler came to power. And we know what happened after that, the worst crime in history. Now, I do believe, and it's already been mentioned, I've already believed in this, that social media is the downfall. And it manipulates people's brains. But it's going on in universities that used to be the seat of learning, school teachers, so many people. And I just cannot believe that this is tolerated. I mean, this is anti-Semitism has been going on the streets of London for 2 years.
I hate to tell you, but it's a lot longer than that, Rebecca.
Well, yes, probably. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But it's been going on for far too long, and it's been tolerated. We want all Jews dead from the river to the sea. Why has it been tolerated? And why are so many human beings so wicked when after the Holocaust, when the Jews have done in the main nothing wrong? I just am bewildered. I'm very, very concerned about this. What can be, there's too many people. I mean, look, there's terrible things going on all over the world. And the people who demonstrate were going on about pro-Palestinian, they're pro-Palestinian, what's happening there, which is, it's terrible things have been happening. But I mean, what about Ukraine? What about what's going on in Iran? It just doesn't make sense. It's all about the Jews. And I think you can manipulate people, and it's a very, very worrying thing that's happening all over the world. People people feel safe with other people. Do they really know, all these people, what happened in the Holocaust?
Let's put that to Dov.
Rebecca, firstly, I completely agree. And as Iain said, by the way, I think this has been going on for a lot longer than 2 years. Just to put an example to you, the Warsaw Ghetto existed in in the centre of the city with high walls that everyone could see, 400,000 Jews crammed into it in its peak, and the world remained silent. So you said, why do people do nothing when they know about this anti-Semitism, when there's people on the streets for the past 2 years at least marching and saying anti-Semitic things? Not all of those people anti-Semitic, of course, but the answer is I don't know, but this is a phenomenon throughout history that ordinary people stay silent as the Jew is being othered, as the Jew is being persecuted. And we saw that during the Holocaust, and we're seeing that again today. And I think so many Holocaust survivors feel let down when they were promised never again. Every year there's this platitude on Holocaust Memorial Day, never again, from every single politician. But we are seeing things again that led step by step to a twisted road of the Holocaust. The Holocaust didn't happen overnight. It happened in the most civilized, the most educated society at the time. You speak about Dr. Mengele, for example, Rudolf Hess, Albert Speer. These were some of the most educated people in the world, doctorates, PhDs, double PhDs in some senses. And these were people who were able to not only manipulate others, but were able to do this evil to themselves through that twisted road. And it's that step by step, it's that drip by drip anti-Semitism which leads to the complete othering of the Jew, and which leads to things like the Holocaust. And I'm not saying that there'll be gas chambers in Eastern Europe again, but certainly there will be mass violent anti-Semitism, as we're seeing, because of those words. Because the Holocaust didn't start overnight, but the words that were existent then in the 1930s and the 1920s, they are existent again today in the world. And Holocaust survivors feel increasingly worried about that. There was a survivor who wrote in the Telegraph only last weekend that if she was younger, she would leave this country, not because she fears for her life, but because she fears about those words which exist in society today in our country with no pushback. So I would appeal to everyone who's listening, when you hear those words, to just try and push back on them, and to say the reason they're so dangerous is because we've heard from Holocaust survivors, we've heard from Lily Abbott's great-grandson about how she, in her last years, was worried about those words and knew where those words can lead to if left unchecked and unchallenged.
Are these same things happening in France, in Spain, in Italy?
Well, this is a phenomenon across the world. I think other countries are dealing with it better. I think France and Belgium, by the way, you've seen mass exoduses of their Jews. The French community has halved in the past 10 years. And so I think the question for British listeners tonight, non-British listeners, is if you want to see the Jewish community, your friends, your work colleagues, some people may have never met a Jew, but those who have, your neighbours, if you want to see them leave en masse, then fine, leave it as it is. That's what happened in France. That's what's happened in Belgium. If you actually want to tackle this head on, then start speaking up. And I do believe that the silent majority stand with us. I do believe that. And we're told that so often. But it's time to start hearing from them.
OK. More from Dov Foreman. More of your questions in just a few moments' time. 0345 6060 973. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Another U-turn from Rachel Reeves today, this time on pubs. But is a chancellor who gets it wrong so often really up to the job? Plus, why this Holocaust Memorial Day is the most important yet.
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
10 to 10 on LBC. Joe says, LBC have anti-Semites listening. Why don't you get one on the programme and see what they say? I mean, why would I? I mean, it's a very strange thing to say on International Holocaust Memorial Day, to say, oh, well, let's have somebody who's anti-Jewish. I mean, frankly, I haven't actually seen any anti-Jewish texts, or we haven't, as far as I know, we've had no phone calls of that nature. And if we had done, frankly, today of all days, I wouldn't want one on, thank you very much. I'm sure Dov would be very able to deal with them, but I don't think we need that today of all days. Dave says, your Holocaust guest is such an excellent guy. My boss at the Bank of England was Jewish. He was the best boss. I worked there for 35 years. I think it is or was the demonstration in London that's causing these hate issues. Another text here. Go back to Israel, not here. This is my country. On Holocaust Remembrance Day, an airport employee harassed visibly Jewish men at a Polish airport. 81 years later, the lesson still hasn't been learned.
Well,
assuming that's true, that is a terrible thing, isn't it? That people are willing to look somebody straight in the eye and say something like that.
Well, that's what makes anti-Semitism so worrying to me in the modern day, is how many people are so willing to be so open and brazen about it. And that goes back to the point, I mean, this was obviously in Poland, the person who messaged says, but there are people in London who on university campuses are able to say, I love Hamas, which is a prescribed terror organisation, or say things like, you're Jewish, you should die in a hell, and nothing ever happens to them. They don't even get kicked out of the uni, let alone go through any sort of prosecution. And I think that's why, by the way, back to why anti-Semitism is so prevalent in this country, much of the reason is because of police forces like the West Midlands Police, which have lost complete control of the anti-Semites and also faith of the Jews, but also the fact that like the CPS doesn't ever prosecute these people. And that is worrying to me. And that also sends a message to the anti-Semites that you can keep going as normal. And by the way, just on that comment, they always say go back to Israel, and then you go to Israel and they say actually there should be no Jewish state. So you can never win with these people.
No, and I think that is something that, I mean, it's quite difficult to counteract. And I know, look, over the past 3 years, I have hosted countless phone-ins on anti-Semitism and also obviously what's happening in the Israel-Gaza war, and I find it's the most challenging thing to do as a news presenter, where I made very clear my support for Israel right from the start, and as the whole war progressed, it became more and more difficult, I think, for a lot of people who were on Israel's side to defend a lot of what was going on. But you can't conflate that with the general issue of anti-Semitism, can you? And exactly. And I found that a really difficult one. I'll admit that.
And just on that, by the way, people would never consider going up to a Russian or a Ukrainian, I mean, depending on what side they're on of this war, where over 1 million people certainly have died, and throw hatred at that for what their country has done. And bear in mind that most Jews in the UK are not even citizens of Israel and have no say. And no one would ever consider going up to a Chinese person to go and talk about the Uyghur genocide. And back to the BBC question this morning, why did I find it so annoying that I was asked about Gaza? Because in all my years of Holocaust Memorial Day, at least 6, and my great-grandmother, many decades of doing this, she was never once asked about any sort of other hatred or war going on in the world at the time, or other genocide, even comparing it to the Bosnia or Rwanda genocides. No one ever asked her about that, or me. No one ever asked me, what about the Uyghurs? But suddenly, people see that the Jewish state is involved in a war and they think that they can bring that into the Holocaust. But as I said earlier, the Holocaust has to remain unique. It is unique. And it has to remain, especially on this day of all days, sacrosanct in the way that we talk about it.
Right, let's speak to Jonathan in Chippenham. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, I'm a little bit, I kind of agree with you, Ian, because I'm a little bit nervous about, I didn't really want to come on and talk about this, and it's because I don't want to make a mistake, and I don't want to, my anxiety or my nervousness might say the wrong word, so it comes from a good place.
Well, welcome to my world, Jonathan.
You're married too. Anyway, my belief is that our world, right, is the most disconnected that it's ever been. Right, if you look at anything in terms of antidepressants we're using, or alcohol, or drugs, or wars, or there's a massive disconnect between people, and And because of that, and I think because of the fact, I say this, please take this the right way, I've always felt that the Jewish story has been told as one of a victim, right, as though this terrible thing happened, which it did, and that anti-Semitism is still happening, which it is happening. But the truth is that the story of the Jews is incredible power and strength. I mean, they survived. They were almost exterminated from the face of the earth, and still survived today. And the reason I say this is I remember when I was growing up as a young boy, I was about 7 years old, and she told me stories about Auschwitz, and I remember her saying to me vividly about babies being put in ovens. And I remember being absolutely horrified. And my mother said, so don't tell him things like that. And she got really angry about it. And she said, no. She said, well, when I'm gone, there'll be no more first-hand accounts of what it was like to live through this. And her good friend who was Polish and escaped and actually came to the UK. When I would talk about him in terms of being a victim, and she'd always say to me, no, he's the most amazing person you could ever meet. His story is incredible. And I've always felt that the Jewish view on it, the way people think about it, is as a victim, and actually it's a story of massive success. I hope that's taken the right way.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. And,
you stayed on the tightrope, Jonathan. Let me assure you.
Exactly, and I think you're right. I think that the Jewish story is one of hope, one of resilience, and we can learn a lot from that. And I think the reason that we had so much success, quote unquote, inverted commas, on social media with my great grandmother's story was because we showed people not only those harrowing testimony and that harrowing things that she saw, because we do need to teach those, because otherwise they go to the grave with the survivors and will never know the sheer horror of the Holocaust, and it is important to learn that. But we also showed people how she managed to come through from the darkest of tunnels and was able to rebuild, and she had a very large and loving family of 3 children, 10 grandchildren, 38 great-grandchildren, and in her final year, at almost 101, a great-great-grandchild. I do think, though, that the Jews are the victims in the story of the Holocaust, and this goes back again to that point earlier about people not mentioning Jews. We are the victims, and it is important to mention the Jew when it comes to the Holocaust. I know that's not what Jonathan was saying, but I do think it's important to say.
Right, let's finish off with John in Fleet in Hampshire. Hello, John.
Oh, hello there. I've only just tuned in, and I heard your guest talking about the silent majority, so earlier in the day, I was listening to the news, and it was talking about on Holocaust Memorial Day encouraging people to put a candle in the window. So I don't know if that's something that is widespread, but I thought, oh yeah, I'll do that. I know one Jewish person who happens to be someone who's an occasional pastor at my church, so he's ethnically Jewish, and it's quite interesting actually. He brings such an interesting perspective to some of the Bible stories that we hear about on Sunday mornings, and because he culturally he can see about he can kind of bring that cultural aspect to it, which is so fascinating, and it's just such a as I say, I don't really know many Jewish people living in North East
John,
Hampshire, but
thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you.
We've got to finish purely because we've nearly reached the end of the programme. Dov, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope we've stayed on the straight and narrow, and I'm not going to get traduced on social media for something that I've asked or whatever.
I won't offend you, Ian.
But it comes with the territory. Thank you very much indeed. That's Dov Foreman there. And the title of your great-grandmother's book
is Lily's Promise, How I Survived Auschwitz and Found the Strength to Live.
Great, thank you very much. Now, if you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the top stories and opinion, put your news categories in the order you want, pause and rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store right now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But now, it's time for Ben Kentish.
Thank you very much indeed, Ian. Hello there, very good evening to you. Ben Kentish here on LBC. On the programme,
we want to back our pubs. They are huge assets in our local communities, and this government wants to stand by them.